Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for waiting for us to begin. It is my pleasure to welcome you into today's workshop for marine protected areas of the Mesoamerican reef and its resilient potential. My name is Ishtel Pot. I will be moderating today's proceedings, and we would like to, at this time, turn over very quickly to Nadia Budd from the World Wildlife Mesoamerica here in Belize for her introduction. For those of you joining us, we'd like to also invite you to introduce yourselves via the chat box. For those participants who need translation, there is a translation option at the bottom of your screen. Nadia?
Thank you, Ishel. So good morning, everyone. Allow me to extend a warm welcome to you to today's workshop on marine protected areas in the Mesoamerican reef and their resilience potential. We are delighted to have you here with us, and thank you for participating. The complex of coral reefs and marine protected areas is indeed an important topic. Where they exist, coral reefs are one of the greatest assets to countries. Millions of people depend on them for livelihoods and for nature-based solutions to buffer against storm events and to feed national economies. But coral reefs are also very threatened. Pollution, unsustainable fishing practices, rising temperatures and sea level, ocean acidification, and storm events continue to have an impact on coral reef health, function, and resilience, including within marine protected areas. Overcoming the challenges faced by marine protected areas, and more broadly coral reefs, require a united effort to undertake science and research needed to inform on the ground action, to undertake meaningful national and local management actions, and to undertake effective stakeholder engagements. In this era of climate change, we need to invest much more efforts in scientific analysis to better understand how to mitigate risks and impacts, how to build resilience, and generally, how to adapt to the changes that are sure to come. Every action and measure must be done under a climate change lens. Despite the real and growing challenges, practical and effective solutions exist at every level of our societies. There is a role for governments, but there are equally important roles for civil society, private companies, philanthropic organizations, and individuals. And most importantly, our collaboration between these groups. Collective action is critical, and so is individual action. For at the end of the day, it is individuals who have the power to change their behavior. The good news, though, is that at this point, we generally know what we need to do to address the threats facing our coral reefs and marine protected areas. It's not a mystery. It is not beyond our capacity. Everyone in this webinar, I am sure, have some idea to contribute. We are all aware on some level of effective steps that people are taking or can take, both large and small. We will hear about some of these during the presentations that are lined up for us this morning. Let's continue to invest in efforts tirelessly. Thank you, and once again, welcome to today's workshop.
Thank you, Nadia, for that address, for welcoming us into today's proceedings. At this time, we'd like to acknowledge the organizations that have made this workshop possible: WWF, Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment, Fondo Sam, NOAA, the International Climate Initiative, Healthy Reef for Healthy People, Medio Ambiente, CONAM, Belize Fisheries Department, the Government of Honduras, the Instituto de Conservación Forestal. This morning, we will be having several presenters. I'm sure you've looked over your agenda. But before we move into our presentations, we'd like to invite you to especially pay attention to the question and answer box. During the presentations, you can log all your questions and answers into this area so that we can follow and respond to the questions directly after the presentations. Each presenter will have approximately 10 minutes to present, followed by a 5-minute Q&A. Our first presenter for this morning is Jose Arturo Gonzalez, who is the Interim Director of the Costal Occidental de Isla Mujeres, Punta Cancún y Punta Nusec National Park, CONAP, Mexico. He is an environmental biochemical engineer, graduated from the Universidad Autónoma de Campeche. He has a master's degree in marine biology and a specialty in pollution of coastal, lagoon, and estuarine systems. He graduated from Sinastav Merida unit of the IPN. He has completed 2 diplomas, one in environmental auditing and results-based budgeting. He has served as a federal inspector for Profepa in matters of environmental impact, federal maritime, terrestrial zone, wildlife, ANP, and industrial verification. He has collaborated with users of the tourism and fishing sector in Isla Arena, Campeche, Disalam de Bravo in Yucatan and Quintana Roo, and has coordinated at the regional level the execution of social programs for CONAMP. Good morning, Mr. Gonzalez. The time is yours.
Hola a todos, muy buenos días, colegas y amigos. En un momento voy a compartir mi presentación para que la puedan visualizar. ¿Me permiten un minuto, por favor? Gracias. ¿Pueden visualizar mi presentación?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Bueno,
Yes, we can.
Mi nombre es Arturo González, como ya lo comentaron, trabajo en el Parque Nacional Costa Occidental de Isla Mujeres, Punta Cancún y Punta Nizuc, y el área de protección de flora y fauna, manglares de Nichupté, ambos pertenecientes a la Comisión Nacional de Áreas Naturales Protegidas. Y pues estamos ubicados en Cancún, Quintana Roo, México. Nuestra área de protección o superficie de protección tiene una superficie total de 12.930 hectáreas, de las cuales 4.257 hectáreas corresponden al área de protección flora y fauna manglares de Nichupté, la cual está conformada por 12 polígonos, y esta área natural protegida fue decretada el 26 de febrero de 2008 y cuenta con un programa de manejo que fue publicado en enero de 2015. Aunado a que esta área natural protegida es sitio Ramsar con número 1777. Por otro lado, el Parque Nacional fue decretado en el 19 de julio del 96 y su programa de manejo en su actualización fue publicada el 2 de agosto de 2016. Esta área natural protegida consta de 3 polígonos con subzonificación y zonas de uso público, las cuales tienen diferentes grados o categorías de conservación. Está conformado por 3 polígonos y diferentes subpolígonos. Dentro de los atractivos que tenemos vinculados a ambas áreas naturales protegidas, pues tenemos que son zonas de avistamiento de aves, es una zona importante turística a nivel nacional e internacional. Tenemos extensos manglares asociados al área de protección de flora y fauna, que obviamente su salud repercute en el grado o buen grado de salud de los arrecifes naturales. Tenemos diferentes especies de fauna, tenemos arrecifes de coral, tenemos diferentes pues atractivos tanto paisajísticos como faunísticos. A pesar de lo atractivo y lo interesante y lo bonito de esta área natural protegida o de este complejo, pues lamentablemente está asociado a problemáticas en esta área natural protegida, como muchas áreas naturales protegidas del Caribe que tienen presión costera, pues tenemos a los encallamientos que nos afectan los arrecifes de coral, tenemos a las enfermedades.
Disculpe, Arturo.
Sí.
Discúlpanos, por favor, que te interrumpamos. Es que no están corriendo tus diapositivas, estamos viendo la portada.
Ah, no, perdón, voy a ver cómo lo muevo.
Perdón,
permítame. No te preocupes. A ver si podemos. Compartir, ¿dónde está el? Aquí está. Voy a pausar y a ver si podemos. A ustedes me dicen si ya la pueden visualizar.
Ahí ya se ve bien.
Sí. Entonces me quedé aquí, bueno, rápidamente. ¿Esta sí la vieron? Si no, se las vuelvo a explicar. ¿Sí?
Sí, muchas gracias.
Perfecto. Bueno, como un poco más rápido, la superficie de protección son 12,000 hectáreas. Estamos conformados por 2 áreas naturales protegidas, en este caso el Parque Nacional Costa Occidental de las Mujeres y el Área de Protección de Flora y Fauna Manglares de Nichupté, los cuales cuentan con decreto y programa de manejo. Como ya les había platicado, presentan atractivos paisajísticos y faunísticos muy importantes, sobre todo para las actividades turísticas y económicas del estado y obviamente del país, ¿no? Y también son de recreación y educación social y ambiental para toda la población que vive asociada al área natural protegida. Pero como ya bien les había platicado, pues como todas las áreas naturales del Caribe, tenemos problemas asociados al desarrollo costero y a las actividades náuticas que se presentan en la zona. Tenemos encallamientos, tenemos enfermedades de corales, como la presencia del síndrome blanco, etcétera. Tenemos la presencia de especies exóticas invasoras. No estamos exentos de la afectación por el cambio climático. Tenemos el embate de huracanes que directa o indirectamente están afectando a los arrecifes de coral. Tenemos contaminación del agua, contaminación por la presencia de sargazo. Tenemos desarrollos costeros desmedidos o mal planificados, que no respetan los programas de ordenamiento. Otra de las cosas que nos afecta mucho es la pesca ilegal. En nuestras áreas naturales protegidas la pesca no está permitida y la pesca que se ejecuta en la zona pues es ilegal. Tenemos actividades lucrativas que no cuentan con autorización. Esto quiere decir que yates privados prestan ilegalmente actividades náutico-recreativas lucrativas, ¿no? Tenemos un turismo intensivo permanente en el área natural protegida, en este caso el Parque Nacional de Cancún. Aproximadamente tiene una visitación de 1 millón de visitantes al año, lo cual nos obliga a plantearnos estrategias de manejo adecuadas para disminuir el impacto que pueda tener la alta visitación. Tenemos dragado de pastos marinos y pues obviamente asociado a todas estas actividades tenemos el tráfico marítimo. Cuando hablamos de tráfico marítimo, pues observamos que podemos ver mucha cantidad de embarcaciones, motos acuáticas, las cuales ponen en riesgo a los visitantes que están haciendo snorkel, los habitantes que están haciendo buceo y sobre todo a las unidades de arrecife porque pues empiezan a tirar las anclas y las anclas empiezan a afectar o lastimar a los arrecifes de coral y sobre todo a los pastos marinos, los cuales estos últimos pues han estado incluidos en la norma oficial mexicana en un estatus de protección. Dentro de las actividades no permitidas más recurrentes que hemos observado en el área natural protegida, pues tenemos, como ya lo mencioné, el anclaje de embarcaciones, buceo semiautónomo, apnea que no se permite y sobre todo cuando empiezan a capturar especies de fauna con arpones. Tenemos el achicamiento de las sentinas de las embarcaciones, la extracción de la flora y la fauna muerta, viva o muerta, navegar con cualquier embarcación en áreas que son señalizadas exclusivamente para natación, buceo autónomo y pues sobre las formaciones coralinas y pastos marinos. Tenemos también tránsito de embarcaciones demasiado grandes con calados mayores a 2 metros que ponen en riesgo las unidades arrecifales, los pastos marinos y por ende pueden ser potencialmente consideradas, lamentablemente podrían ocasionarnos un encallamiento. Tenemos recorridos en motos acuáticas de forma desmedida, remoción de pastos, remolques recreativos y la pesca ilegal. Para el caso del área de protección de flora y fauna manglares de Inchupté, pues tenemos, como es una zona donde predominan los humedales, pues tenemos otro tipo, no tan diferente al área natural protegida, pero sí vinculante a la misma y que le afecta, pues obviamente es el del monte de manglar, el dragado, el derrame de hidrocarburos, el vertimiento de residuos y también pesca ilegal, interrupción hidrológica de flujos e incremento del tránsito marítimo y contaminación. Dentro de las acciones, ¿qué estamos haciendo como área natural protegida para proteger y conservar nuestros objetos de conservación? Hemos trabajado con estrategias para el vertimiento de hábitats artificiales de tipo artístico, como el Museo Subacuático de Arte, que está en Cancún, hábitats artificiales como agregadores de peces en diferentes zonas para permitir la recuperación de sitios con fauna. Hemos trabajado para promover la resiliencia y adaptación al cambio climático con la creación de nuestro programa de adaptación al cambio climático. Para el caso de atención de huracanes, estamos trabajando con apoyo de TNC en la activación de brigadas para la atención o recuperación de fragmentos o recuperación in situ de los arrecifes de coral o de las unidades arrecifales fragmentadas por el paso del huracán o cualquier huracán. Tenemos también campañas de educación ambiental que promueven la conservación y promueven que no se capture, no se pesque, no se consuma las especies del loro, y que no se promueva la afectación de los pastos. Tenemos creación de vivero de coral, somos uno de los viveros de corales más grandes del Caribe, con una capacidad de 4.500 fragmentos de corales que los tenemos en el Bajo Pepito. Tenemos las acciones de multipoda, que son acciones de restauración en las unidades arrecifales. Tenemos también el vertimiento de barcos hundidos como arrecifes artificiales. Hemos trabajado con el Programa Mexicano del Carbono para promover, identificar y cuantificar los pastos marinos en el área natural protegida y pues últimamente hemos trabajado desde el 2019 en un convenio de colaboración con WWF para fortalecer las capacidades del área natural protegida para promover la resiliencia de los arrecifes, ¿no?
Disculpe, Arturo, ya nos pasó el tiempo y tenemos una pregunta ya, así que si tienes algunos puntos que quieres terminar y después vamos a pasar a la pregunta.
Sí, rapidísimo. En el caso de acciones de conservación del área natural protegida de manglares de Inchupté, pues vamos muy asociados a lo mismo, compartimos algunos programas, pero pues está más asociado a erradicar fauna exótica, promover el avistamiento de aves y promover sitios alternativos de reconversión de espacios que eran basureros que estaban dentro del área natural protegida, como una zona de aprovechamiento social, ambiental y de reconversión. Yo lo dejaría ahí, perdón y una disculpa por pasarme el tiempo. Gracias.
No. Gracias también. Fue muy interesante esta presentación. This is a very interesting presentation. I believe the overview was very comprehensive. And we could see all the work that has been done. There is one question for you, Arturo. The question is in English. How successful have the establishment of the artificial reefs been for the conservation and revenue impact?
Sí, en términos de visitación, la aplicación de diferentes estrategias para el vertimiento de hábitats artificiales o pecios, en este caso embarcaciones, ha funcionado bastante bien. Sin embargo, hemos observado que hay que ser estratégicos en la colocación de estos hábitats artificiales. Mi recomendación sería no ponerlos muy cercanos a las unidades arrecifales, porque pueden llegar a tener tanto éxito estos hábitats artificiales que pudiera convertirse en un problema. Eso nos obliga a nosotros a ser estratégicos y replantearnos y, si es necesario, reubicar los hábitats artificiales. Si el hábitat artificial está muy cercano a la unidad arrecifal, puede causar un efecto contraproducente o contrario. Lo que yo recomendaría es que la selección de los sitios, por el éxito que hemos observado, debe evaluarse bastante a detalle. Pero aquí han funcionado bastante bien. No sé si respondí la pregunta.
I believe you have. If there are any additional questions, participants can just enter them into the chat and we will go responding as the meeting moves ahead. Once again, Arturo, thank you so much for that very interesting presentation, the overview of the marine protected areas in Mexico. Up next, we have Mr. Adriel Castaneda, who will be presenting for us an overview of the marine protected areas in Belize. Mr. Adriel Enrique Castaneda is a fisheries officer with the Belize Fisheries Department. He initially joined the Fisheries Department as a consultant to assist with the implementation of a rights-based fisheries management tool called Managed Access in 2010. He later was hired as fisheries officer in the capacity of deputy coordinator for the Capture Fisheries Unit, leading the monitoring and management of main commercial species such as conch, lobster, and sea cucumber. Since 2017, he was appointed coordinator of the Ecosystems-Based Management Unit, which is responsible for the oversight of the management of marine reserves, ecosystems, monitoring, and various other policy interventions in Belize. He has a Master of Science in Natural Resource Management and Rural Development from El Colegio de la Frontera Sur in Mexico. He has a wealth of knowledge in community engagement, right-based fisheries management, marine protected areas management, stock assessment, and fisheries monitoring. Mr. Castaneda, the time is yours.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Ishel, just a quick thing. Will you guys be sharing a presentation or should I share my screen?
Once you've passed your presentation on, the coordinators will be sharing your screen. Will be sharing your presentation for you.
I already sent. Let me share my screen. I think it would be easier. Can you all see?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. I know we're limited in time as well. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Adriel Castaneda. I'm Fisheries Officer for the Belize Fisheries Department. So I'll be touching on a few things of the Marine Protected Areas Network in Belize. Just to start, I think it's important to clarify how these are declared. Protected areas in general can be declared under several ministries. But in the case of marine protected areas, there are two important ministries, which is the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Risk Management, and the newly formed Ministry of Blue Economy. So under the Sustainable Development Ministry, they have the mandate for declaration of nature reserves, national parks, natural monuments, and wildlife sanctuaries. And in our case, under the blue economy, we have under the Fisheries Act demanded to declare marine reserves specifically. Recently, with the passing of the new Fisheries Act, we are able to declare now aquatic reserves, which are the freshwater inland reserves, which have not been done, but are now we're now legally able to do so, and also for the declaration of special management areas. In terms of the declaration of marine protected areas, it started around in the 80s, 1982 to be specific, with the declaration of the Half Moon Key Natural Monument in the Lighthouse Reef Atoll. Consequently, there was a big jump to 1996 with the declaration of the Belize Barrier Reef Reserve System under UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. And this included 7 protected areas, which is Bacalar Chico, the Blue Hole National Monument, Blue Half Moon Key Natural Monument, Globa's Reef Marine Reserve, Saltwater Key Marine Reserve, Laughing Bird Key National Park, and Sapodilla Keys Marine Reserve. And of course, each for its significance for high biodiversity, threatened species, productive ecosystems, and unique geological formations and natural beauty. In terms of how they're spread throughout our waters, you can see that there's clearly the network forming. The light blue colors are the marine reserves. We have 9 of those. We have 2 natural monuments in Lighthouse, and we have 2 wildlife sanctuaries, both Corozal Bay and Laughing Bird Key. And we also have 13 spanning irrigation sites, which are the black dots on the map. And all of these cover approximately 23.5% of our territorial waters. And with the recent expansion of the Sapodilla Keys Marine Reserve, we now have about 6.28% of our EEZ under protection as well. Now, MPAs are important nationally, but in terms of our fishery framework under the Fisheries Department, they're one of the key components of our system. So MPAs are important for, like I mentioned, biodiversity protection, ecosystem services, rebuilding fisheries, which is one of the main goals of the marine reserves, but importantly as well is for resilience to climate change. And these are supported with a strong institutional and legal framework. Like I mentioned, our Fisheries Resources Act was enacted last year in February, which is a modern piece of legislation that encompasses all those new concepts that are important for fisheries management. We also had the development of the Fisheries Policy Strategy and Action Plan, which basically links all these components together. And finally, we have the area-based management or rights-based management system that we had implemented called Managed Access, which in essence divided the coast into different zones and has a strong stakeholder support for it, basically to try to build stewardship by creating some sense of ownership of their respective fishing grounds. And these, of course, are within several of our marine reserves. The Fisheries Department is directly responsible for managing 5 marine reserves, which are Bacalar Chico, Key Cocker, Saltwater, Blowers, and Sapodilla Keys. These we are in charge of the day-to-day management, in charge of staff, and so on. However, we also have 3 other marine reserves that are under co-management. And basically, we have given the day-to-day management to a specific entity. In this case, we have local NGOs. So for Gladden Spit, for example, we have Southern Environmental Association, with whom we have the co-management agreement signed with. In the south, we have Port Honduras Marine Reserve being co-managed by Toledo Institute for Development and Environment. And we also have Turnef Atoll Marine Reserve being co-managed by the Turnef Atoll Sustainability Association. In the case of Holchan, Holchan has its own board and it operates as a statutory body. Nonetheless, the Fisheries Department is part of that board and contributes significantly towards its management. So in general, like I said, the department is directly responsible for marine reserves, which are essentially a subset of MPAs, focusing mainly on fisheries management. Nonetheless, it also has, like I mentioned, based on the different zonations that we have, it contributes to biodiversity protection, and it offers opportunities for recreation, research monitoring, and environmental education, among others. So this is essentially our zonation scheme. About 80% of the reserve is general use zone, basically allowing for extractive use for commercial purposes. The other 15% is the conservation zone, which are mostly non-extractive. It does allow some level of catch and release, and mostly for tourism activities. And the fully no-take zone per se is what we call a preservation zone. And this is about 5% of the overall marine reserve. And this is mostly for areas that have some specific quality that we would want to protect. So very often it's endemism, or it's an important nesting area, or that kind of stuff there. Our management is guided by a 5-year management plan. This is updated every 5 years, and it's a document that is done in consultation and full participation of the stakeholders via different consultation efforts. And basically, this outlines the various targets and actions that need to be done for improvement in management effectiveness of the marine protected area. Science also plays an important role, both for the fisheries management and for the management of the reserve. We focus on monitoring commercial species. We do pre and post assessment for lobsters, the same for conch. We do lobster morphometrics. We're part of the national conch surveys that are done every 2 years. We also collect catch per unit effort data, and in the case of Bacalar Chico in the north, we also do beach drop monitoring. Apart from that, we're also constantly engaged in biodiversity monitoring. We've been using the SMP, the Synoptic Monitoring Program, for quite some years, but we're transitioning now to AGRA, which is something that our staff are recently being trained. We also do monitoring for corals, for sea turtle nesting and hatching, the stony coral tissue loss disease, spawner irrigation sites, and water.
Minute and a half remaining in your time.
And of course, we tie this to a strong education component. In 2019, we developed the Communication, Education, and Public Awareness Strategy and Action Plan for the department. It basically guides the department's effort to raise awareness, change attitudes, and encourage action on marine conservation and climate change. And as part of the management plans, we have also been including now a community engagement strategy, which guides how we engage with community and what are the various actions that are necessary for improved management. And we've also done continuous engagement with the public. And in terms of other initiatives, we've been using technology. All of our reserves now use the SMART system, the spatial monitoring reporting tool for tracking the enforcement efforts, but also for biodiversity monitoring. We've been testing vessel tracking systems. In collaboration with the partners, we've also assisted in implementing traceability systems at the cooperatives to document catch. We've piloted drones for enforcement and biodiversity monitoring as well, and we are continuously engaging in coral reef restoration efforts. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Right on time. Thank you so much, Mr. Castaneda, for your presentation, the overview of the protected marine areas in Belize. I don't know if we have any active questions for you at this time. It doesn't look that way on my end. All right. We'd like to remind our participants that you can enter questions into our question and answer box, but there is also a discussion session towards the end of our program where you will be able to speak as well. Once again, Mr. Castaneda, thank you so much for your presentation. Oh, see.
Thank you very much.
Actually, there are a couple questions that just came in. The first one is, can you discuss the financial needs of the Belize MPAs? That's the first one.
Well,
And this,
sorry, continue.
and the second one is in relation to the use of drones.
Yes, I think the topic of financing is an interesting one and an important one throughout the region and throughout the world. There are never enough finances or only stream of direct finances comes from the fees collected at the reserves and those generated via grants. For government, it's a bit more difficult to obtain grant funding. Not all donors tend to give direct funding to government entities. But we have through PACT, for example, being able to get important granting for the day-to-day management of the reserves. The ministry itself is looking at other streams. We're looking at developing a specific foundation for raising funds for the management of MPAs in general for Belize. So it's an avenue that we're slowly working on and trying to see what are the options for better financial sustainability of the reserves.
Okay. And the second question is, in what ways do you implement the use of drones in research?
The department has mostly experienced that with enforcement. Nonetheless, one of our co-management partners I know has been using that for monitoring of yes, actually monitoring of dolphins and manatees, which is tide. They have been using that to document where these animals are seen and to document if they're important, I don't know, reproduction areas or breeding areas, that kind of stuff there. Apart from that, we haven't used drones for monitoring. What we're currently also working on is using this smart system, which is technology as well, to mark nesting site for turtles, but that's about it.
Thank you so much, Adriel, for that intervention. I don't know, we might have another question here.
Sure.
No, it looks like we're done. I did see a comment just now that there is no sound from the panelists answering the questions, only hearing the moderator. I'm not sure if there's an issue with the settings. I know I heard the answers loud and clear on my end. Mr. Castaneda, would like to thank you so much for your presentation this morning and for the information. There's one more question. Or actually, there is a comment in the question and answer section. It says, a challenge with drones is that for the use in management, we need bigger, more expensive drones that have the ability for longer flight and better resolution. And that comes from Mr. Valdemir Andrade, Belize. Thank you very much for your contribution, Mr. Andrade. At this time, we're going to move forward with our next presentation for this morning. We'd like to remind all our panelists at this time as well that when it comes your turn to present, to kindly turn on your camera so that our participants can see who's speaking. And it also adds to the dimension of the conversation that we are having at this time. So our next presentation is an overview of the marine protected areas in Honduras. And this presentation will be brought to us by Alejandra Reyes, who is the head of the Department of Protected Areas at ICF Honduras. She is a forest engineer and has an extensive experience in the management of protected areas, representing Honduras in different forums and conferences related to this issue. She has also participated in research and production of scientific reports for the management of protected areas. Ms. Alejandra, the time is yours.
Bueno, buenos días a todos. Realmente es un gusto estar con ustedes y compartirles un poco de la gestión de las áreas protegidas en Honduras y que conozcamos un poco de lo que estamos haciendo y también las perspectivas que tenemos en el corto plazo. Para iniciar, sí quisiera dar algunos datos de lo que es nuestro Sistema Nacional de Áreas Protegidas y después me enfocaría en lo que es el Caribe hondureño y algunas acciones que estamos desarrollando. A nivel del país tenemos 91 áreas protegidas que conforman nuestro sistema nacional, de las cuales en porcentaje tenemos un 62% de superficie terrestre y 38% de superficie marina. Sin embargo, de estas 91 áreas, 74 tienen declaratoria legal y todavía tenemos 17 pendientes por tener ese reconocimiento a nivel del legislativo. Y algo importante dentro de nuestras áreas, bueno, es justo esa vinculación con los medios de vida y toda esa importancia que tiene con los sectores económicos en el país. Y bueno, nuestras áreas protegidas, la creación, para que un área sea reconocida como tal, debe contar con un decreto de creación o una ley especial a través del Poder Legislativo. Y todo el tema de regulaciones, igual como lo comentaba el compañero actual, también además de lo que se establece dentro de los decretos de creación, también se establecen regulaciones en los planes de manejo de nuestras áreas, que también son las directrices en el tema, es nuestra directriz en el tema de gestión de las áreas protegidas. Y en nuestro país, la administración de las áreas protegidas está a cargo del Instituto Nacional de Conservación Forestal, Áreas Protegidas y Vida Silvestre. Pero para la gestión se fomenta lo que es el comanejo o una gestión compartida, donde se involucran a la sociedad civil, municipalidades, academia, pueblos indígenas y otros, con responsabilidades diferenciadas y complementarias que nos contribuyen en la gestión de las áreas. Realmente algo muy importante para nosotros es justo esa integración y que de cierta forma es como, y que es como una de las fortalezas en el tema de gobernanza de áreas protegidas. La integración y apertura y sobre todo que en nuestra ley se tenga ese respaldo para hacer esa gestión compartida, ¿verdad? Y esa integración de diferentes actores. Y en el caso de la creación de las áreas marino-costeras, bueno, tenemos la Reserva Forestal Guanaja, que tiene influencia ya en el Caribe de Honduras. Y aquí voy a poner algunos años, si ven, los mayores esfuerzos en nuestras áreas protegidas se dieron en áreas terrestres, cuando vemos desde que inicia la declaratoria de áreas protegidas, ¿verdad? Sin embargo, hay algo importante. Bueno, hay dos hitos importantes. En el 99, cuando se declara el subsistema de áreas protegidas de la zona sur del país, que es todo el Golfo de Fonseca, y se da ese reconocimiento, ¿verdad? Eso fue algo muy importante para nosotros porque aquí se declaran 11 áreas protegidas y de ellas 10 son marino-costeras. Y después hay otro tema importante, es que la mayor parte de los espacios marino-costeros se han declarado en la última década. Y ese ha sido un esfuerzo bastante importante, donde tenemos también tenemos el Parque Marino Islas de la Bahía, que es nuestra área protegida marino-costera más grande del país, o la que tiene mayor área marina. Entonces sí hay esfuerzos importantes en la última década en el tema de declaratorias de áreas protegidas marinas. Y si vemos, Por ejemplo, en esta última década, igual, el listado de áreas protegidas que se han declarado, la mayor parte de esfuerzos han sido en este sector. Y justo es porque donde, digamos que, bueno, cuando vemos los compromisos que hemos hecho como país, en el tema terrestre estamos bien, ¿verdad? Y quizás porque quizás nuestras mismas instituciones o hemos tenido más esa visión, ¿verdad? Pero todavía en el tema marino hay mucho que hacer en el tema de reconocimiento y declaración de espacios. Tenemos una deuda. Tenemos una deuda y muchos desafíos en eso, ¿verdad? En realmente garantizar ese reconocimiento legal para que podamos gestionar esos espacios marinos. Y bueno, a nivel del país tenemos ya 18 áreas protegidas legalmente declaradas, donde si vemos, tenemos casi 1 millón de hectáreas que tienen ese respaldo, marinas que tienen ese respaldo legal. Y bueno, y esta es como y de esas áreas marinas, casi el 32% es terrestre. Y cuando vemos a esos compromisos que tenemos ante la Convención de Diversidad, solo el 5% del área marina del país está bajo protección como área protegida, ¿verdad? Entonces tenemos un reto importante en este tema en este tema, y no solo por el hecho de declarar, sino porque hemos visto que es una necesidad importante, sobre todo para establecer estrategias en comunidades costeras, protección de ecosistemas marino-costeros, y realmente ese compromiso de salvaguardar toda esa vida marítima y sobre todo esa vinculación también con los medios de vida y comunidades que tenemos en esa zona, ¿verdad? Y sobre todo que también es una de las principales riquezas que tenemos en el país. Entonces, este es un paso importante que tenemos todavía que dar en el tema de reconocimiento de espacios marinos. Y en el tema de algunas acciones, como les mencioné antes, bueno, nuestras acciones se hacen en coordinación con nuestros socios. Y como siempre lo digo, la mayor fortaleza que tenemos en este caso como gobierno justo son esas alianzas, porque reconocemos que en la sociedad civil es donde tenemos el mayor conocimiento en el tema de gestión de áreas marino-costeras. Entonces, y esa oportunidad de establecer esos convenios puntuales nos da mayores fortalezas, ¿verdad? Pero sí quisiera como resaltar algunas acciones que estamos haciendo. Estamos en un momento para nosotros muy importante, sobre todo en las áreas protegidas de la costa atlántica, porque estamos en un proceso digamos, en un momento importante donde estamos haciendo una revisión de todos los instrumentos de planificación y armonizando, ¿verdad? Y que esto nos ha llevado a hacer una revisión y a veces a repensar mucho las estrategias de manejo para tener esos planes de manejo elaborados en función de la información técnica legal, procesos de construcción participativa y gestión adaptativa, planes específicos y realmente que estos nos respondan a un modelo de gestión efectiva. También en el tema de fortalecimiento institucional y actores del SINAP, en el tema de normativas, capacidades técnicas y logísticas, equipo personal. En este momento sí quiero comentarles que nosotros tenemos una intervención fuerte de la cooperación alemana justo en estas áreas, ¿verdad? Y que va orientado hacia el tema de mejorar la efectividad de manejo. Entonces, hemos visto cómo es importante, si queremos tener esos impactos en la efectividad de manejo, realmente armonizar todo, desde la planificación, la gestión e incluso vincular las alianzas y cooperación. Cuando hacemos el inventario de actores, nos damos cuenta de las capacidades que hay, ¿verdad? Y que es importante integrarnos en el tema de generación de información. Por ejemplo, en este momento que estamos revisando la planificación de áreas protegidas, aunque contamos con algunos planes de manejo de las áreas, pero estamos haciendo esa revisión, nos damos cuenta que mucha de la información que se ha generado no está siendo utilizada, por ejemplo. Y vemos cada vez más la necesidad de nosotros como gobierno, además de establecer alianzas a través del comanejo, establecer otro tipo de convenios que nos permitan avanzar en estos temas. Y esto, en este año estamos con estas 3 líneas de acción muy fuertes, haciendo muchos esfuerzos, ¿verdad? Y el otro año viene un fuerte componente de implementación de acciones. Eso no estoy diciendo que no estamos haciendo nada en campo, ¿verdad? Porque la implementación de programas de manejo se sigue haciendo, el tema de monitoreo, a nuestros objetos, acciones de educación ambiental, trabajo con comunidades se siguen haciendo. Sin embargo,
nos queda un minuto.
Ok, voy a por rápido. Y bueno, y esto en estas áreas, y solo quiero cerrar con el rol de la ciencia en las áreas protegidas y sobre todo ver, como les mencionaba, estamos en un momento importante donde es importante para nosotros armonizar todo ese tema de protocolos y todo eso articularlo en una plataforma de gestión de conocimiento. Y aquí, para mencionar, tenemos algunas plataformas nacionales como la Mesa de Monitoreo, el Sistema Nacional de Información, pero muchos socios que colaboran en este tema, pero que hoy más que nunca vemos que para que contribuyan a esa gestión efectiva es importante integrar, vincular y fortalecer estas iniciativas de investigación, ciencia ciudadana y monitoreo que realmente nos ayuden a tomar decisiones y sobre todo en este momento que estamos estableciendo la base de planificación, establecer bases de datos, plataformas de monitoreo que consoliden esfuerzos locales, nacionales y regionales. Yo espero que en el corto plazo podamos tener un sistema de gestión de conocimiento de áreas marino-costeras en base a todos los esfuerzos y donde cada uno de nuestros socios aporte, ¿verdad? Y podamos estandarizar esos indicadores, protocolos y criterios de evaluación y monitoreo de la salud, de los valores de conservación de las áreas protegidas, porque hay muchos esfuerzos, pero es importante la integración de todo para que realmente lo utilicemos nosotros como administradores de nuestras áreas y también nuestros gestores, además de todas esas colaboraciones que se debemos seguir creando. Así que, gracias.
Thank you very much, Alejandra, for that very comprehensive overview of the marine protected areas in Honduras. I think that we have now seen an overview of protected areas in Mexico, Belize, Honduras. We've been able to see where there are similarities, where there are differences, where challenges exist within this sector. We have 5 minutes for question and answers. So if anybody has any questions that they would like Alejandra to respond to, you can just place them very quickly in our question and answer box, and we'll be responding to those at this time.
Seguro todo está claro.
Parece que sí. Well, if we have no questions at this time, Alejandra, once again, thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll move forward with the other presentation on our agenda. Our next presenter will be presenting on MAR Fund, on coral reef conservation and investment. And our presenter is Ms. Angeline Valentine from MAR Fund, Belize. Ms. Valentine holds a master's degree in environmental management from Duke University, as well as a bachelor's in science in biology and natural resource management from the University of Belize. She is the recipient of several awards and honors, such as the OAS Fulbright Fellowship to pursue graduate studies at Duke, a Pew Fellowship to participate in Duke University's Global Fellows Program, and a fellowship from Columbia University in New York to participate in their CU Summer Ecological Experience for Undergraduates program. Additionally, Angeline is also a member of the 2011 cohort of the MAR Leadership Program. Ms. Valentine, the time is yours. We invite you to turn on your camera.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for providing me this opportunity to share a bit of the work that we're doing at MAR Fund to advance Mesoamerican reef conservation. I must say that the work that we do is delivered through our partners on the ground. Are you guys able to see my presentation?
Yes, we can see your screen.
So just a bit about the Mesoamerican Reef Fund. MARFund was established in 2004 by the pre-existing environmental funds of Belize, Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras. MARFund's mission is anchored in driving regional funding and partnerships for the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of the Mesoamerican reef. Our primary goal or strategic focus is to strengthen a functional network of priority coastal and marine protected areas. Thus far, we've had 2 priority setting exercises, which has identified a network of 28 sites. As you will see on my right, there's a map depicting those sites. The sites highlighted in blue were prioritized during our first exercise, and the sites highlighted in red were prioritized during our second exercise. MARFund operates through 5 programs: Saving Our Protected Areas, Fishing for the Future, Climate Change, Clean Water for the Reef, and the Belize Marine Fund. I will now proceed to tell you guys a little bit about each of these programs. Our Saving Our Protected Areas program is endeavored to enhance management and effectiveness of a network of priority coastal and marine protected areas across the region. We have been doing this work primarily through the Conservation for Marine Resources in Central America project, phases 1 and 2, which are supported by KFW. We've had broad investments of 10 million across the region through this project, and this has allowed us to support 9 coastal and marine protected areas in the 4 MAR countries. Now, these protected areas receive more large-scale, detailed, or direct investments. Of these 9 protected areas, 3 were in Belize. There was the Port Honduras Marine Reserve, Saltwater Key Marine Reserve, and the Corozal Bay Wildlife Sanctuary, which saw investments totaling $1.8 million US. We have also supported another 6 MPAs across the region, which saw investments of 1.8 million. And apart from these more large-scale direct investments to those 9 protected areas, we also supported another broadly another amount of protected areas that received funding through other MARFund channels, for example, our small grants program. Currently, MARFund is in the process of developing, in collaboration with KFW, a 3rd phase of the Conservation for Marine Resources in Central America project. We anticipate that through this initiative, we would look at targeting the 14 sites that were prioritized under the 2nd priority setting exercise. Our Fishing for the Future program has been able to support a total of 40 fish replenishment zones across the region. We've supported establishment, management, and monitoring of these replenishment zones. We've also supported regionally 9 fish spawning aggregation sites, and we've supported the establishment of the Sustainable Fisheries Network. The Sustainable Fisheries Network has membership of over 30 organizations. It has an active executive committee, which enjoys representation from partners across the region. And this committee also works actively through working groups that looks at different aspects of sustainable fisheries management. There's also our climate change program, and a key channel through which we advance this program is our Reef Rescue Initiative. There are 4 overarching objectives of this Reef Rescue Initiative. The first is long-term and sustainable financing for continuous and emergency restoration. And so there's emergency funds, there's small grants that are used to support reef restoration, and there's our parametric insurance for the reef initiative. Our parametric insurance for the reef initiative seeks to provide response and reef restoration after hurricanes. We're happy to say that thus far, we have selected 7 pilot sites across the 4 MARC countries that will participate in this insurance coverage program. These 7 sites were decided upon through a national multi-stakeholder collaborative and consensus process. Additionally, MARFON recently signed an agreement with the INSU Resilient Solution Fund that is now looking at piloting this insurance mechanism for the reef. So that's very exciting news. Secondly, the program seeks to support the science and restoration of rehabilitation of reefs. A key factor in doing this is the establishment of the Reef Restoration Network. It's a network of approximately 52 organizations, both regional and international organizations, members of which are dedicated to the restoration, conservation, and protection of the Mesoamerican reef. And these members hail again from the 4 MARC countries, Belize, Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras. Through the Reef Rescue Initiative, we have also been supporting actions and efforts to look at the stony coral tissue loss disease. Additionally, the Reef Rescue Initiative promotes and supports the commitment of governments towards policies that facilitates restoration, and it supports alternative sources of income and new employment opportunities. Through its climate change program, MARFON has also supported efforts towards mangrove conservation. We have developed a regional strategy for mangrove management, conservation, and restoration. This strategy has been shared widely with partners, and we're happy to say that we're currently in the process of finalizing the regional mangrove restoration manual. That should be shared with you guys shortly. Our Clean Water for the Reef program is nested in improving solid and sewage waste management. To date, we have been able to provide support to partners in Honduras for modeling water treatment plants, building local community capacity, organizing waste collectors. Additionally, we have provided support that has produced studies and documentations, manuals for better practices in hotel and restaurant best practices for conservation and for reef protection. This has been done in Holbox and in Yombelam in Quintana Roo. Additionally, regionally, we have supported water quality monitoring activities and studies in the 4 MARC countries. Our final program is the Belize Marine Fund program. And this program endeavors to enhance marine conservation for broader impact across the MAR. To date, we have awarded 29 grants under this program, 16 targeted grants and 17 small grants for a total investment of 1.2 million. Areas of project focus includes effective APA management, reef restoration,
1 minute remaining,
sustainable fisheries, effective branding and marketing of our reef, stewardship for our youth, and income diversification. These funds have helped to support 8 MPAs and have helped to outplant 21,455 coral colonies. MARFON channels its fund through a few mechanisms. One of those is our small grants program, which has 3 windows, our traditional, reef rescue, and Belize MARFON windows. We also provide support through our Marfish project, and that project is nested in working to protect spawning aggregation sites across the region. We have special grants program that is supported by entities such as the Summit Foundation, re-granting program supported through the Oak Foundation, and as I mentioned, our KFW project and endowment funds that provide revenues. During the last 15 years, MARFON has invested quite a bit of funds to the region for MPA management and conservation and for reef protection and conservation. The fund has raised $31.5 million in endowment funds. It has raised $28.6 million in project funds. It has provided support to 88 beneficiary organizations, 25 coastal and marine protected areas, and it has supported the outplanting of 84,435 coral colonies. As I mentioned before, we have been able to provide support for the development of a number of technical tools and have supported the establishment and operation of a number of networks, including the Connectivity Network, the Reef Restoration Network, the Sustainable Fisheries Network, and the Fish Spawning Aggregations Network. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you too for that very comprehensive presentation, overview of the important work that MARFON is doing. We have two questions for you. The first is, with the program of clean water, do you have any initiative that looks at the problem of contamination between Guatemala and Honduras?
I know that there has been water quality analysis projects in the past that has looked at water quality monitoring. At the moment, I don't believe that we have any active projects looking at cross-contamination. I know we're in the process of working with partners to develop a project that will seek to look at bioaccumulants within the leaves and look at how that is impacting our reef.
Okay. The second question is, how is the water quality data being shared? Is there a standardized collection and analysis methodology for efforts underway to build that? Links to the new Coral HIR Summit project.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, the work that we do, we support a lot of partners and organizations to do that work. And so I know that through WWF, there has been efforts to look at water quality and contaminants across the region and how that is impacting on and affecting the MAR. I know that WWF has shared that work, has shared that data. In terms of the second part of the question that asks how we're tying it to the current HRI grant, is that correct?
HRI, yes. Let me reread it for you. Links to the new Coral HRI Summit project.
Yes, broadly speaking, the HRI Coral Summit project, if it's the one that I'm thinking about, is related to the stony coral tissue loss disease. We work very closely with HRI, both in terms of their reef report card and their eco audit. And I know that there are indicators and metrics in those intervention that seeks to look at water quality, and that should tie different aspects of regional work and collaboration in developing that eco audit and looking at the aspect of water quality and what is needed and required.
Thank you so much for that response. Rosario, I'm going to ask you for a little bit of assistance with the second question that's there in Spanish. I'm not sure that I'm understanding it appropriately to translate for Angeline.
Sure.
You're on mute, Rosario.
Is that the one from Hansel Borjas?
Yes, that one.
Do you currently have any volunteer internship programs in Marfan in Honduras?
That is something that I can follow up with our main office. I would invite individuals to also have a look at our website. I believe there is a component of the website that speaks to job opportunities and other opportunities with the fund. As of now, I don't believe there are any, but that is not to say that it's not something that can be discussed and looked into with the main office.
Thank you very much. And we're out of time for the question and answers for this section. We'd like to thank you so much for your response and of course your presentation. We have one comment. There is a new water quality monitoring project, coral leafing. Once again, I want to invite our participants, if you have additional comments or information, you can add those into the chat where everyone can have access to those. Ms. Angeline, once again, thank you so much for your time and your presentation. The next presenter that we have on our program is Dr. Derek Manzello. He will be presenting from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, on Global Coral Watch Program. So Dr. Manzanello is a coral reef ecologist with a PhD in marine biology and fisheries from the Rosenthal School of the University of Miami. Dr. Manzello is a coordinator of NOAA's Coral Reef Watch Program, an effort focused on the monitoring of coral reef systems through satellite and in situ observations. From 2001 to 2020, he worked at NOAA's Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory in Miami, where he led the development and implementation of the in situ climate change and ocean acidification monitoring for the National Coral Reef Monitoring Program for the U.S. coral reef ecosystems. Dr. Manzello has published on multiple topics in coral reef ecology, and he regularly conducts research that spans the disciplines of biology, chemistry, and geology. His primary research interest is understanding the impact of climate change and ocean acidification to coral reef ecosystems. Dr. Manzello, we invite you to turn on your camera and the time is yours.
Hi, is it possible for you to share my presentation?
Sure, someone from the team will bring up your presentation shortly.
And I apologize, I can't use my camera because my internet connection's a little slow. So hopefully you guys can hear me all right and I don't cut out or anything.
Well, the audio is loud and clear so far, so we're good to go.
Excellent, excellent. All right, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to
Dr. Manzello, we seem to have lost you. Hi, Dr. Manzello, we're not getting any audio from you at this time. We seem to have lost Dr. Manzello. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move ahead in our agenda and we're going to bring him back as soon as he's connected. The next presenter that we have up will be Ms. Nadia Butt from WWF Mesoamerica.
Thanks, Ixchel. Can my presentation be screened?
Sure. While we're getting Nadia's presentation up, I will just give a brief introduction for her. Her major functions include the implementation and oversight of research programs and projects geared at analyzing coastal climate risks, vulnerability and impacts, ecological, social, and economic perspective, and the adaptation of climate change, identification of climate compatible development opportunities, economic evaluation of ecosystem services, including adaptation options, marine spatial planning, ecosystems, conservation and restoration, and other related issues to support WWF's efforts in Belize and the wider Mesoamerica region. Nadia also heads WWF's Field Program Office in Belize. Nadia, the time is yours.
Thank you, Ixchel. I also noticed that Dr. Manzanillo just, rejoined. Can I?
We can pass back over to him if he's prepared.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, I'm willing to give it another shot.
Okay. Can his presentation be brought up?
Okay. All right. So am I still with y'all? Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right. Fantastic. Again, well, thank you so much again for this opportunity. So my name's Derek Manzello. I just started as the federal coordinator of NOAA's Coral Reef Watch this past February. A man by the name of Mark Aiken held this position for about 15 years. Many of you may know Mark. He's a very well-known man. But he decided to retire and go on to bigger and better things. So I am now in charge of Coral Reef Watch. And to give you a little background, Coral Reef Watch has been providing decision support tools for coral reef managers, scientists, and the public to monitor and forecast heat stress that's associated with coral bleaching for over 20 years. There's members of the team that have been with Coral Reef Watch for excess of 20 years. Next slide, please. So as we know, coral reefs are very important. They're often called the tropical rainforests of the sea. They're one of the most diverse ecosystems on Earth, and they certainly are the most biodiverse ecosystem in the oceans. It's often said that they provide habitat for about 25% of all known marine species, whereas they only occupy about 0.1% or so of the sea floor. Next slide, please. Thank you. So corals are very simple animals. They're only 4 cell layers thick. And they're animals similar to a sea anemone, and they live in a symbiosis with dinoflagellates. The dinoflagellate algal symbionts, collectively called zooxanthellae, can provide about up to 95% of the energy requirements of the coral. However, the symbiosis is highly sensitive to elevated temperatures, and it breaks down, and the corals will expel their zooxanthellae if under heat stress, and they will turn white. That's because the zooxanthellae also provide much of the color of the coral. So when you see a bleached coral, it's still generally still alive, and it can recover if the heat stress declines within a certain amount of time. But if it stays, if the conditions stay warm for an extended period of time, then you will get mortality. And the reason this happens is the corals essentially starve to death because the symbiotic algae provide majority of their energy demands. Next slide, please. Thank you. So at Coral Reef Watch, we work primarily with sea surface temperature. And what we do with satellite sea surface temperatures to develop products for coral bleaching is first we have to develop what is called a climatology. So a climatology is essentially the average or mean conditions that occur at a given site. So for coral bleaching, we are interested in the climatology of the warmest part of the year. So we take mean values for each month of the year, and then the warmest part of the year, that's called the maximum monthly mean. So in places like Belize and Mexico, this usually occurs in August or September. That's the warmest month of the year. So as I said earlier, when corals are stressed by high temperatures, they will bleach. So when sea surface temperatures are 1 degree Celsius or more greater than this maximum monthly mean, that's when we begin to accumulate thermal stress. So next slide, please. So the coral bleaching hotspot, this is simply the current temperatures for a given day on a coral reef relative to that maximum monthly mean temperature. So what the coral bleaching hotspot is simply just an anomaly product. So what this image is showing you is how temperatures at a given site or pixel compare on a given day relative to temperatures, the mean monthly temperature during the warmest month of the year. So the hotspot is instantaneous daily heat stress conducive to coral bleaching. And the degree heating weeks product is how we estimate thermal stress on coral reefs. So what this does is it sums all the hotspots over the past 12 weeks and uses that as a metric to estimate the thermal stress. So next slide, please. So the next, there we go. So then the bleaching alert area is something that was come up with by a fellow by the name of Gong Lu. Now he's been with Coral Reef Watch the longest. And the beauty of the bleaching alert area graphic is that you can look at this and you don't even need to understand the algorithms of Coral Reef Watch or what goes into it. You can look at this and simply ask yourself, what is my reef currently in red? If your reef's in red, then that means that reef is experiencing heat stress that is expected to cause coral bleaching. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're interested in sea surface temperature anomalies. So the degree heating week essentially measures the hotspot summed over a 7-day period. So 1 degree heating week implies that sea surface temperatures have been 1 degree Celsius greater than the average normal maximum monthly conditions at a given site. So 4 degree heating weeks means temperatures have been elevated at least 1 degree Celsius above average for 1 month, so for 4 weeks. Now, 8-degree heating weeks is when sea surface temperatures are elevated by 1 degree Celsius for 8 weeks. So we expect bleaching to occur when sea surface temperatures have remained a degree Celsius above average for about a month. So that's degree heating weeks of 4. Excuse me. And we expect mortality to start occurring when we have sea surface temperatures remain 1 degree Celsius above average for about 2 months or 8 weeks. So that's our bleaching alert level 2. So in the simplest sense, the light red means we expect bleaching. The dark red means we've expected bleaching at a site at a severity and a duration that we expect mortality. Now the yellows and the orange, essentially the bleaching watch and the bleaching warning. A bleaching watch essentially just means that sea temperatures at a given site have now reached their maximum monthly mean conditions. So a bleaching watch means we're getting into the warmest part of the year for a particular reef. Bleaching warning means sea surface temperatures have now gone 1 degree Celsius greater than that maximum monthly mean, and heat stress is starting to accumulate. Therefore, there's potential bleaching in the future. Next slide, please. So there's 2 generations of satellite coral bleaching heat stress monitoring. If you've been in the coral reef business long enough, you may remember the first generation. This was retired. So this provided sea surface temperature data for any pixel of where there's a coral reef on the globe twice per week at a 50-kilometer resolution. Now, recently, we instituted our next generation or our current products. This is version 3.1. Now, these products provide data on a daily basis at a 5-kilometer resolution. And these use 2 different satellite data sources. It's a geopolar blended analysis. So the sea surface temperature data that Coral Reef Watch uses has evolved and is growing, and it's getting better with time. Next slide, please. So as many of you are probably aware, we just experienced the 3rd global coral bleaching event on record. That started in about June 2014 and extended through May 2017. So the figure on the top panel of this figure shows the maximum heat stress levels during the event. Now, if you remember, the reds are where we expect bleaching, and the dark reds are where there was heat stress occurred, where we can expect some mortality to have taken place. So in the top, what we see is the maximum amount of thermal stress, or heat stress experienced around the globe during the global bleaching event. So what you can see is that, more than 3/4 or 75% of the reefs around the planet suffered bleaching level heat stress. And some reefs, more than half of these reefs, experienced multiple bleaching events. So this was the most significant record on event and had very dire ecological ramifications with high mortality in some locations. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to introduce you to our regional virtual stations. So we've established 214 regional virtual stations. And what these do is essentially, if you click on any one of these little icons here, it'll zoom in to a region on the planet where there's coral reefs, and it'll provide you all the information you want to know to be informed about the potential for coral bleaching and thermal and heat stress at a given site. Next slide, please. So if you zoom in here on the Caribbean region, which should pop up here in a second, hopefully, there we go. You can see all the icons in the Caribbean, and this is current as of June 20th. So you'll see in the Caribbean, the Atlantic side, in the Caribbean Sea, in the North Atlantic, we are now in what is a bleaching watch. And what that means is have reached or are approaching temperatures that occur during the warmest part of the year. So we're entering bleaching season. So right now we're getting to the warmest part of the year. Next slide, please. So in the next two slides, I'm going to zoom in on our regional virtual stations for the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef. So the first one is for the northern portion of the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef. So what we see here is if you look in the top left panel where it says current, and you see that black line. So these are the current conditions for the northern portion of the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef in Mexico. So currently in the conditions, we essentially don't have much heat stress at all. We're under a watch for the southern part and then the far northern part there by Cancun. And the other thing about this graphic is this includes our outlook product. So you'll see it says weeks 1 through 4, weeks 5 through 8, and weeks 9 through 12 in that little 4-panel graphic there on the left. So what those are our outlook product for what's expected to occur over the next 4 months. And this is based on climate forecasts. And this is something that was also developed by Gonglu. And what this shows you is the forecasted heat stress for the Mexican portion of the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef out 4 months in advance. And the good news is it doesn't look like we're expected, or excuse me, this region of the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef is expected to experience heat stress that would be expected to cause coral bleaching this year. If you look at weeks 9 through 12, you'll see we'll probably be essentially in a bleaching watch through the next 3 to 4 months, which is great. And the reason for that is because we are now in a La Nina phase. We're no longer in an El Nino and so neutral. So we're currently going to likely experience cooler conditions on the planet. So on the top right, this is your time series data for this regional virtual station. So the dark blue in that figure is your daily sea surface temperature values. So those little crosses you see that are under the dark blue, those are your your monthly mean sea surface temperatures. So again, you can see the maximum monthly mean sea surface temperature for this region occurs in September. So whenever that dark blue line goes above that cross of a degree or more, you start accumulating what are degree heating weeks. So if you look at that figure, you'll see when that dark blue line goes above the bleaching threshold, again, the threshold is plus 1 degree greater than the maximum monthly mean SST, then you start accumulating degree heating weeks. This gives you 2 years time series, and it shows you essentially what's going on right now. So in the bottom right, you see all of the data available for this regional virtual station plotted on the same plot. So what's cool about this is that you can see how this year is stacking up compared to other years. So this year is in that dark black line. And as you can see, this year, again, unfortunately, we're right up there in terms of being one of the warmest years on record for this site. So next slide, please.
Dr. Manzello, the time has left us. If you have 2 or 3 points you'd like to wrap up with, so we can move ahead with our agenda for this morning. I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the same exact slide just for Belize, just for the southern portion of the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef. And again, it's the same information. As of right now, we're not forecasting any significant bleaching at this site, but we are under a bleaching watch. So we will be watching it. Next slide. And I can skip over all this. This just basically sells you the Coral Reef Watch program. And next slide should be the last one. And yeah, this should just be the acknowledgement slide. I just want to acknowledge the Coral Reef Watch team, Jackie Delacour, Eric Geiger, Gonglu, William Skirving, Blake Spady, and Ben Marsh, because these are the people that really do the hard work in Coral Reef Watch. I'm essentially just a figurehead. And I don't know if the next slide popped up or not. Maybe not. Anyway, I'm done if you don't want to. It's all right. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much as well, Dr. Manzello, for the presentation. We do have a question for you. I'm going to have to ask Rosario again to jump in because it's a question in Spanish and I'm not sure that I'm going to translate it accurately.
Oh, there's a slide. There's the team.
The one from Mariana Elizabeth.
Yes, yes, that one.
She's saying if this rise in temperature somehow affects any kind of coral without
in the area it is placed. It says pride here, but I don't get the pride part.
I think it doesn't matter wherever it's placed. So does this rise in temperature?
If the temperature rise affects the coral in any place.
Oh, okay. I think I see what the question. So I think the question is asking.
Thank you so much.
I think the question is asking if the temperature increase is going to be the same everywhere. You think? I mean, I think maybe that's where it's going, and that's a great question. And no, so different places are going to warm at different rates, and that is a very complicated question that has a lot to do with hydrodynamics and ocean currents. And also, I believe meteorology in terms of weather patterns. So no, some places are going to warm faster than others. So there's been a lot of research right now to try to identify places that might not be warming as fast as others, to try to identify kind of refugia. So people are looking into that, trying to identify which areas might not be getting so warm that they're stressful. So hopefully that answers the question.
Hopefully it does. If anybody else has any additional questions, you can always enter them into the chat. There is a comment in the general chat box asking if the link to the platform could be provided so that participants would be able to access the information there.
Sure, absolutely. I'll share the website in the chat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manzello, for your presentation, for the important information that's been shared this morning, the work that has been doing, it's ongoing at NOAA. At this time, we're going to pass over to Nadia Budd from WWF here in Belize for her presentation on ecological reef resilience and analysis within marine protected areas of the Mesoamerican reef system. Nadia, the time is yours.
Thank you, Aksha. Can my presentation be screened? So this presentation, we aim to share with you the key findings from a rapid integrated reef resilience study that was carried out for some targeted marine protected areas in Mexico, Belize, and Honduras. The initiative is part of a collaboration among a number of organizations, including those whose logo are on the slide, but as well NGO co-managing entities as well for marine protected areas. Next slide. The presentation will take the following format. I will provide a very brief background on the resilience analysis and then dive into the ecological reef resilience assessment that was carried out. Two of my colleagues will follow to present on the other two topics shown here, economic benefit analysis and stakeholder perception of MPAs. Next slide. So what is a coral reef resilience assessment and why go through the process? Well, resilience assessments involve measuring or assessing the attributes that contribute to making a coral reef resilient, and also collecting measures on human-related stressors that can reduce reef resilience. Coral reefs are considered to be naturally resilient, but with increasing natural and human threats and impacts, this is being greatly tested. These types of assessments make it possible for us to map relative resilience in your area of interest and to track changes through time. It can be easily assessed by looking at the source of resilience at different locations and the cause of differences in resilience. Managers and stakeholders can evaluate the potential for management or stewardship actions to improve resilience in different areas. Supporting resilience needs to be a management priority. Repeating resilience assessments through time enables us to measure and monitor change in resilience potential and management progress, allowing us to adapt management as needed. Next slide, please. For our ecological resilience analysis, we use the UN Environment Guide to assessing coral reef resilience that was published in 2017. Within it, there is a 10-step process that can be used to carry out an assessment. Within the guide also is mentioned the key indicators and stressors to target in your analysis. Among these are ecological indicators such as coral diversity, herbivore biomass, coral disease, macroalgae cover, and coral recruitment, to name a few. As well, there are stressors such as temperature, sedimentation, nutrients, among others. Next slide. I will now take the opportunity to dive into the ecological analysis. Next slide. What is resilience? Resilience is the innate ability of a system to recover or bounce back following perturbations, be it from human or natural factors. It can be defined from both an ecological and socioeconomic perspective. From an ecological perspective, this schematic depicts some of the key indicators that must be taken into consideration when analyzing resilience, as it is also informed, and this is also informed by the UN Environment Guide for Assessing Coral Reef Resilience. Next slide. For this study, we look integratively at the coral reef ecosystem. We know that coral reefs exhibit both benthic and fish species that are important to the integrity, function, and health of coral reefs. So it was important for us to assess these. As well, they have important social and economic benefits that need considering. Next slide. Reef ecosystems, unfortunately, continue to be impacted by local human activities, such as agriculture and aquaculture, and urban expansion, which threaten coastal and marine ecosystems through land cover change and pollution. As well, locally, reefs are also subjected to increased fishing pressures. Next slide. We also live in an era of global change where intensifying anthropogenic activities have led to climate change, with some of the most serious threats to coral reef being projected increase in storm intensity, coral bleaching, and ocean acidification, all resulting in habitat loss. Next slide. In response to these threats, managers have used marine protected areas, which have proven successful in protecting coral reefs from direct threats such as fishing pressure. However, given the costs and efforts placed into managing marine protected areas, it is important to understand whether these areas can withstand or recover from natural disturbances and to improve ecosystem functioning. Next slide. Thus, this project set out to analyze anthropogenic and natural threats to targeted marine protected areas, as well as assess their resilience. The approach entailed the use of an analytical framework to calculate an integrated reef resilience index using 9 indicators of coral and reef-associated species and 2 stressors, sediment and temperature. This index allows for a simple process for evaluation of the level of resilience of MPAs over time. Next slide. In terms of the approach, we did the following. Next slide. We targeted a total of 25 marine protected areas within the Mesoamerican Reef region. Data analyzed encompassed the period spanning 2006 to 2018 as sourced from the Healthy Reef Initiative database. The Healthy Reef Initiative collects data, coral reef data every 2 years. So in all, we were able to look at 6 years of data based on the data that is available. Overall, data from 517 surveys across the region were analyzed together. The map on the slide shows the reef sites and the boundaries of the marine protected areas that we targeted. Next slide. These are the 9 indicators assessed in the analysis. The ecological indicators are coral cover, fleshy macroalgae, coral species richness, coral disease prevalence, coral recruitment, herbivorous fish biomass, and sea urchin density. The 2 environmental stressors are temperature and sediment that we targeted. Next slide. The indicator data values for each site within the MPAs were ranked according to specific ranking descriptions of very good, good, fair, poor, and critical. Ranking descriptions of each biological indicator are shown on the slide and takes into consideration a numerical range per condition. Each indicator was given equal importance and was equally weighted within the assessment. On this slide, the ranking for the coral indicators are shown: coral cover, which are coral cover, species richness, disease, and recruitment. Next slide. On this slide, the ranking indicator for algae, which we targeted mainly fleshy macroalgae, is shown here. Next slide. The ranking indicators for herbivores are these, which includes both fish, herbivorous fish biomass, and sea urchin density. Next slide. In addition to the ecological indicators, we tried to assess 2 reef stressors, as I mentioned before, temperature and sedimentation. Temperature, particularly sea surface temperature, is very important to assess given its potential impact on reefs when elevated, fueling mass bleaching events on reefs. Our project's climate modeling, which was carried out in partnership with NASA and Columbia University Center for Climate System Research and Stanford Natural Capital Project, reveals an expected increase in temperature which could continue to impact reefs. Thus, it is an important indicator to monitor over time. Next slide. This slide shows the ranking for the temperature stressor indicator using degree heating weeks from the NOAA Coral Watch program. And Dr. Manzanello gave a good overview of the NOAA Coral Watch system. And so we were able to use the temperature data from their system. The degree heating weeks temperature data were obtained from NOAA and spanned the period 2006 to 2020. We use degree heating weeks data because we have good cover and it's consistent across all the MPAs. But for the future, it would be good to integrate data with local temperature loggers. We also attempted to assess sedimentation as a stressor on reefs. Water quality is influenced by many factors, ranging from oceanographic delivery of nutrients, algal growth in the water column, terrestrial contributions such as mud and silt, and anthropogenic inputs. We attempted to model sedimentation effects on the reef using KD90 from NASA Ocean Color remote sensing data to assess the impact of sedimentation and turbidity on coral reefs. The reason behind using NASA Ocean Color is because this algorithm allows for assessing diffuse attenuation coefficient for downwelling irradiance at 490 nanometer wavelength down to 1 meter depth. calculated using an empirical relationship derived from in situ measurement of KD90 and blue-green band ratios to remote sensing reflectance. Next slide. We combine each indicator into a 5-point scale where 5 is the highest and 1 is the lowest. And then we combine all indicators using equation 1, shown on this slide, which is basically doing an averaging. Finally, we normalize the scores between 0 and 1 for each MPA using equation 2 that are both shown on this slide. Next slide. In terms of results, we got the following. Next slide. Out of the 25 MPAs assessed in the study, most received a fair resilience score as shown in yellow on the map. One MPA in Mexico received a poor score as shown in orange on the map. One MPA in Mexico, 3 in Belize, and 3 in Honduras received a good score as shown in green on the map. Noteworthy is that Half Moon Cay in Belize received a score of very good as shown in blue on the map, but we only had 2 indicators out of the total 9 indicators targeted in the assessment. Thus, this does not represent the full picture for resilience for this particular MPA. Next slide, please. Here, we are going to take a look at each country in more depth, starting with Mexico. Looking at this table, you can see the 5-point scale value assigned to the resilience ecological indicators and the final integrated reef resilience index score, which is color-coded according to the key at the bottom. One thing to note is that we have some data gaps regarding sediment, localized sediment data, that is, within the particular areas themselves, and one MPA did not have any data for sea urchin. We have good coverage or representation for all the other indicators. Only one MPA, Costa Occidental, Isla Mujeres, and Punta Cancun y Punta Nuzuc received a good resilience score. Saincan received a poor resilience score. Next slide, please. Similarly for Belize, you can see that we have data gaps for sediment, localized sediment values within MPAs, but good coverage in terms of other indicators such as coral cover, herbivores, coral recruitment, and sea urchin. Looking at the final score, most MPAs range between fair and good resilience. 3 marine protected areas received a good score: Holchan, South Point Lighthouse Reef Atoll, and Laufenberg Key National Park. Note that Half Moon Cay only has 2 indicators, so this score is not a true reflectance of resilience. There are also a few other data gaps. For example, Holchan is missing data for disease and coral recruitment. Gladden Split is missing data for disease also, and as well Port Honduras. Next slide, please. Lastly, looking at Honduras, we see that there is also data gaps for sediment. Other data gaps include Tela and Parque Nacional Izopo with missing data for macroalgae. Looking at the final score, most MPAs range between fair and good. 3 MPAs, Isla de Bahay, Tela, and Cayos Cochinos, received a good resilience score. The other 3 MPAs received a fair resilience score. Next slide. I want to spend a few minutes touching on other key findings and next steps. In terms of key takeaways, based on this analysis, we now have baseline figures to use as reference for future resilience assessment. We have an integrated reef resilience map and table providing information on MPA resilience. We also identified that some MPAs require more sampling, in particular for sediment, which is missing from the analysis at the local level. As a next step, data gaps for missing indicators need to be filled. In particular, water quality data needs to be collected for all the MPAs. Next slide. Even though we were not able to obtain localized water quality information from within the MPAs themselves, we did model potential sedimentation to the marine environment. These maps on the panel shows the watersheds that drain into the Mesoamerican reef region. It's important to remember that these inland areas can affect the water quality in marine protected areas. Sediment export is the amount of sediments that actually makes it into a stream. It is most strongly influenced by topography, as you can see from the elevation map on the slide. The mountains in Guatemala and Honduras show the highest export. Land use also plays a big role. Agricultural areas, barren land, dirt roads, and other such uses generally produce more erosion and are not as good at retaining soil as dense grassland or forests. Looking at Guatemala and Honduras, not only are these areas mountainous, but they also have a lot of agricultural pasture. Even though it's difficult to say where the soil goes, we could use this type of information to look at places that are losing the most soil. The information can be used to target improved agricultural practices, etc., which could also benefit farmers who don't want to lose their soil. Sediment export is not relevant for the Yucatan, Mexico. This area is flat and karstic with no streams and very complex groundwater hydrology. These types of areas require a specialized and usually localized models, so the sediment export results are not relevant for there. Next slide, please. This slide shows the sediment export as percent, the relative export of each country in the region to the marine environment. Belize contributes the lowest amount of sediment to the marine environment on an order of 6%, compared to the majority of sediment exported to the marine environment by Guatemala, 47%, and Honduras, 46%. This may be due to the local geography, where Guatemala and Honduras have the highest mountain peaks with more highlands and steeper slopes compared to Belize. In terms of land use classification, Belize has more natural intact landscape than Guatemala and Honduras. Next slide, please. We initially tried to leverage remote sensing turbidity data using the KD90 from NASA Ocean Color, shown on the two maps on the right of the slide, where blue indicates low turbidity and red indicates high turbidity. Although this type of information can be very useful as it provides data on a monthly basis at the global scale, these data sets are at a coarser scale, essentially 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers, and research that can help establish ranges for KD90 values that can suggest stress on coral reefs is lacking. As I mentioned before, using this algorithm returns the diffuse attenuation coefficient for downscaling irradiance at wavelengths of 990 nanometers for 1 meter depth. Next slide. We also look at sedimentation, and potential influence on nearshore water quality. The total sediment export is over 600 million tons of sediment per year, with Guatemala and Honduras contributing the majority. We diffuse the sediment export from the shoreline into the marine environment with Natural Capital's water quality model. Due to the spatial variation in sediment export on land, we found that there is more total suspended sediment by an order of magnitude longer, sorry, by an order of magnitude along Guatemala and Honduras coastline compared to Belize. We visually compare the modeling plume to sea whiffs imagery, which can provide weekly information about chlorophyll A, colored dissolved organic matter, and suspended sediment in the water. This information is used to determine how far offshore the plume disperses and identify which reefs are exposed to riverine input. Next slide, please. Using all the aforementioned information, we have also been able to identify watersheds that are linked to marine services due to change in water quality, as shown on the map with the land-sea color codes. For instance, in panel A and B, we found that watersheds in central Belize, in particular the Belize River watershed, and southern Belize, example Monkey River, Deep River, and Moho Rivers, as well as in Honduras, Chamilicon, can affect Belize's coral reefs. However, this work is based on modeling, and we would like to use localized empirical data to do this resilience assessment in the future. Next slide, please. Thus, here we are proposing a simple, cost-effective method to assess sedimentation using the SECIDIS approach, which is simple and can easily be integrated in field surveys. SECIDIS is a standardized and common metric that captures the basic elements of water quality. It can allow us to identify reefs areas exposed to increasing sedimentation. Note though that this method is using horizontal measure because coral reefs are often shallow and often have clear waters. Water quality data should be recorded more frequently than benthic and fish sampling, usually between weekly to monthly intervals at standardized sites that are ideally located within the monitoring sites, existing monitoring sites for the marine protected areas. So that's my presentation in a nutshell. The other sections will be presented by my other two colleagues. Over to you, Ishel.
Thank you very much, Nadia, for your presentation. A very comprehensive overview. A lot of information came out. There are 3 questions. I don't know if you want us to look at those right now.
Sure.
The first one is, can the UN assessment criteria and steps be shared?
Indeed, we can certainly share that. And we are also creating a summarized version that we will get designed and also circulate as well, so people can use those to guide their resilience assessment as going into the future too, if they are interested.
Okay, and there was one, what are the parameters to measure coral reef resilience?
In my presentations, I mentioned 9 indicators, 7 of which are benthic and 2 stressors that we had used. But in the NOAA 10-step guidelines that I showed in one of my slides, there are a number of other indicators that can be included once you have the available information to integrate in the analysis.
Okay. A question in the general chat is, have you identified if there are other species under the heat stress that may cause viruses and bacteria which would affect coral reef?
Unfortunately, we haven't, our analysis didn't get to that level, that in-depth version, but it's something for the future that we can look at, certainly.
Okay. There is another one in our chat bar in the question and answer section. It says, I think the missing data for some sites is having a significant impact on these comparative results. Why not try comparing them with all the indicators that you have for all sites? This is the only valid comparison between sites, but you can look generally by country over time. Has resiliency declined or improved over time?
Very good question, of course. We were trying to go by the guidance in the NOAA in the UN Environment Guidelines. And what we tried to do is when we did the averaging, we averaged across only those indicators that we had information for. So for example, if we had indicators for only, like maybe only 7 of the 9 indicators, we would average across those 7 indicators. If we had indicators for the 9, we would average across those 9 indicators. We were essentially, and the aim was to also flag these missing information so that, managers can target those collection of those indicators, which are very important to understand resilience.
And then the last question we have for this section is, from the analysis done, what are the recommendations to finance the collection of data gaps?
Yeah, definitely more science is needed. We need to fill those data gaps as much as possible. So we need to put some more investment in doing that and working more closely to support managers of these marine protected areas to fill in, to do the monitoring needed to fill those data gaps. We also need to have side discussions with managers to see how best we can come up with resilience options and strategies that can also help them to build resilience within their marine protected areas.
Okay. And I've one more, and then we're going to close this section and move to the next presentation. Is what effects, if any, has sargassum had on the reef system?
We know in our research, we didn't look at sargassum per se. We look at macroalgae, but the more, we haven't been looking at the mass, circulation of sargassum within the water column, for example. We look at the macroalgae that are already fixed to the reef substratum, the seabed. But we do know that sargassum is having a significant effect in terms of fish kills, where we are seeing, the mass circulation of sargassum. And we know that it could also affect reef, particularly in shallow areas where they might have mechanical damage because of the rubbing effect, by the wave, that brings it forward and backwards. So there is, conceivable significant impact that sargassum can have on the reef, but it needs further research to fully understand the level of impact.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nidia, for your presentation and the information. So we have 2 other presentations related to this research. The next speaker we are having is Luis Chavez, who is a Sustainable Tourism Officer with WWF Mesoamerica. He is a professional of ecotourism with a passion to promote conservation and sustainable development. For 13 years, he has worked in Central America and internationally within grassroots organizations and international cooperation agencies. As a part of the WWF Mesoamerica team, Luis leads his office efforts to climate-smart coastal marine protected areas and coastal zones in Honduras. He plays a key role in transferring knowledge and capacities to Honduras authorities and coastal stakeholders. Luis, the time is yours.
Muchas gracias, Itchel. Si por favor puedes continuar al siguiente slide de la presentación. Siempre es importante determinar los beneficios económicos que generan las áreas protegidas para entender lo que estamos poniendo en riesgo. Y por eso hemos incluido como parte del análisis esta sección. Siguiente, por favor. Para lograr esto hemos utilizado 3 diferentes métodos que se aplican al análisis de impactos económicos del arrecife de coral en las áreas marinas protegidas. Uno de ellos es el instrumento del Instituto de Recursos Mundiales, que se creó originalmente para Belice como el MPA Economic Impact Tool, o en castellano la herramienta de impacto económico en áreas marinas protegidas, que mide turismo y pesquerías. Adicionalmente, se modelaron dos resultados diferentes para turismo a través de un modelo de recreación en Inves, trabajado por el Natural Capital Project, y un modelo adicional de salud de los corales y biomasa de pesca comercial, enfocado evidentemente en pesquerías. Siguiente, por favor. Adentrándonos un poco más en la herramienta del Instituto de Recursos Mundiales, es una plantilla diseñada para apoyar a los gestores de las áreas protegidas, las ONGs y los agentes de gobiernos a colectar información y a proyectar información económica para medir el impacto del área protegida. Toma en cuenta 3 indicadores económicos: beneficios económicos que genera el arrecife mediante la pesca, beneficios económicos que genera el arrecife mediante el buceo y el turismo por snorkel, y finalmente el nivel de inversión en la conservación que realizan los mecanismos de gobernanza o las instituciones involucradas en el manejo. Slide, por favor.
Hello, good morning. We'd like those who have their microphones open to please mute yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Puedes pasar a la siguiente diapositiva, por favor. Hemos elaborado con esta herramienta 5 casos de estudio. Actualmente está en proceso la recolección de datos en costa occidental de Isla Mujeres, Punta Cancún y Punta Nizuc en México. Ya se ha recolectado en 3 sitios diferentes en Belice. En el caso de Half Moon Cay and Blue Hole, pues como es un solo comanejador, se hizo un solo levantamiento. En el caso de Glover Reef Atoll, también se generaron resultados, y finalmente para Laufenberg Key en Belice. Para Honduras se realizó un estudio de caso en Cayos Cochinos. Siguiente, por favor. Una más. Los resultados particulares para Half Moon Cay, pueden ver cómo lo detalla la herramienta. Nos dice datos o resultados en hospedaje, recreación en el arrecife y el gasto total en turismo. Por supuesto, algunos se preguntarán, Half Moon Cay pues no tiene hoteles, pero la herramienta también permite medir los resultados o el impacto de dónde se quedan los visitantes al área. Entonces, de alguna manera, ese día que el visitante estuvo en el área marina protegida, se mide al menos una noche en cuanto a la herramienta de impacto económico. Finalmente, podemos ver que el área protegida en sí mismo, entre el impacto económico directo e indirecto, que es una de las ventajas que brinda esta herramienta, alcanza los $2.852.000 como impacto económico. Este dato, para referencia, fue obtenido en el 2015. Siguiente, por favor. En el caso de Glover Reef Atoll, de igual manera tenemos un desglose de los resultados, como pueden observar, y siempre la herramienta nos dedica el impacto económico directo del turismo y el impacto económico directo más indirecto. En algunos casos notarán de que es muy similar el impacto, y esto depende también de la cantidad de información que tengamos disponible para introducir en la plantilla Excel que nos generó el Instituto de Recursos Mundiales. Siguiente, por favor. En el caso de Laufenberg Key tenemos una estimación más completa, y por eso observamos un mayor impacto económico del turismo, tanto directa como indirectamente, en el área, generado por el arrecife. Habrán notado que hay dos estimaciones. Yo he estado mencionando la estimación a la baja. En este caso, por ejemplo, son $4.451.000, pero también aparece una estimación a la alta de aproximadamente 17 millones y ha sido así para cada una de las áreas protegidas. Siguiente, por favor. En el caso de Cayos Cochinos en Honduras, de igual manera se aplicó la herramienta. En este caso pudimos obtener un desglose para turismo puntualmente y también para pesquerías. Debido a los datos que se tenían disponibles, principalmente se recolectó el impacto económico directo del área protegida, pero adicionamos también el impacto económico indirecto, sobre todo reflejado en impuestos. Y como pueden ver, las estimaciones aún a la baja y a la alta fueron muy similares, alrededor de $233.000. Siguiente, por favor. En el caso de Cayos Cochinos sí se pudo aplicar la herramienta para pesquerías, únicamente para pesca de aleta o de escama. Y aunque existen otros tipos de pesca en el área protegida, pues no se logró sistematizar. Es parte de las limitaciones que tiene la herramienta en sí mismo, que debemos colectar o tener acceso a los datos. Y finalmente nos arroja un impacto económico directo del área protegida ya ampliado en la suma de turismo y pesca de alrededor de $5 millones. Esto es porque ya toma en cuenta otras variables que tiene en sí mismo la herramienta para dimensionar la economía más allá de lo que es evidente. Siguiente, por favor. En cuanto al modelo INVEST de recreación, se utilizó porque no podíamos aplicar la herramienta en todos los casos, requiere un esfuerzo importante, pero tenemos estas opciones que son estimaciones a partir de modelos y les voy a contar un poco de qué trata. Siguiente, por favor. En este caso, el modelo se alimenta de dos tipos de recursos de datos locales que son recolectados de las agencias nacionales de turismo, como entrada de visitantes internacionales a los países e incluso entrada de visitantes a las áreas protegidas. Y a la vez, que es donde viene la parte de la modelación, se recoge información de redes sociales y de esta manera determinamos dónde las personas están visitando en la región del Arrecife Mesoamericano. Se cruzaron dos tipos de datos para este análisis, fotografías de Flickr y hashtag comentarios y fotografías de Twitter. Particularmente estas dos plataformas son de acceso gratuito, sus datos, y es por eso la facilidad para combinarlas. Con mucho gusto podría explicar más detalles, hoy el tiempo no nos alcanza, pero lo que finalmente hace es combinar el número de fotografías, reacciones, etcétera, que tenemos en un área geográfica determinada y ponderarlo para estimar cuántos de los visitantes que los datos locales nos dicen llegaron al país, cuántos se movilizaron específicamente a un área protegida X. Siguiente, por favor. Para tomar en cuenta los gastos y como referencia para entender la estimación, se tomó en cuenta el gasto por visitante día, nuevamente de las agencias nacionales de gobierno, y estas estimaciones vienen de los resultados del 2017. Entonces pueden observar para México, Belice y Honduras, más o menos el promedio de gasto diario de los visitantes. Para México, por ejemplo, fue de $130, para Belice de 148 y para Honduras de 60. Cabe señalar que fue el dato recolectado en 2016. Siguiente, por favor. Entonces, una vez tenemos combinado el dato o la estimación de visitantes más lo que gasta cada visitante por día, obtenemos una estimación de cuánto recibe cada área protegida. Particularmente aquí voy a señalar Cancún, Punta Nizuc y costa occidental de Isla Mujeres. que como pueden ver tiene un impacto económico importante, estimado en 12.3 millones de dólares. Hay una pequeña señal, algunos se preguntarán por qué tiburón ballena aparece de pronto con un bajo impacto económico, y es que los compañeros y compañeras que nos acompañan de México sabrán de que el área de observación de tiburón ballena es mucho más grande que el área protegida en sí mismo. Y esta estimación únicamente incluye el área dentro o demarcada dentro de los límites del área protegida. Siguiente, por favor. Para Belice, los resultados muestran de igual manera que ciertas áreas protegidas son más atractivas que otras, particularmente Saltwater Key, Key Coker, Tornef Atoll y Holchan. Y notarán que Holchan tiene una observación nuevamente, y es que la estimación de visitantes que nos dio fue de 97,000 para 2017, y hay ciertos limitantes en el análisis. En este caso, creemos que es por ser un área marina, que no se logró capturar toda la información de visitación, y probablemente estemos observando una subestimación en este caso. Siguiente, por favor. Para Honduras logramos generar resultados para 4 áreas protegidas y una zona costera. La zona que se observa como zona de interconexión es el área que componen el municipio de Omoa y Puerto Cortés, que presenta el mayor impacto económico. Por supuesto, estas estimaciones están alteradas por otras actividades económicas o otro tipo de visitas, no solamente meramente asociado al arrecife, en esos 2 municipios. Y luego tenemos los datos para Cayos Cochinos, Janet Caguas, Puntisopo, Bahía de Tela y el Refugio de Vida Silvestre Cuyamel, más el Parque Nacional Omoa. Y como pueden ver, y como así podríamos esperar, Cayos Cochinos y Janet Caguas son 2 de las áreas protegidas más visitadas, y que por tanto generan un mayor impacto económico. Siguiente, por favor. Finalmente, vamos a hablar un poco de los resultados del modelo de biomasa pesquera. Siguiente, por favor. Y para entender un poco la metodología de este modelo, que ya más o menos Nadia les explicaba una parte de los estudios que se están haciendo, toma en cuenta, los datos de salud del arrecife a partir de la colección de datos que se realiza entre las áreas protegidas y la iniciativa Healthy Reef, y toma en cuenta los contaminantes generados en tierra, como ser sedimentos. Siguiente, por favor. Y a la vez adiciona las especies de peces de objetivo comercial en cada país para poder lograr el análisis. Siguiente, por favor. Bueno, estos son los resultados para Belice. Estas son estimaciones no en dinero, sino en kilogramos generados por cada área protegida. Y aquí sobre todo observamos que entre más retirada está el área protegida de la zona costera, hay una mayor estimación de biomasa de peces. Esto es una variable importante. Lógicamente tiene que ver con la afectación que genera la calidad del agua en el arrecife y por tanto en los distintos indicadores de peces. Entonces notamos esto, que Tornef Atoll y Saltwater Key son muy importantes, y luego Zapodilla Keys, que igualmente está algo alejado de la costa, pero si recordarán en el mapa que mostraba Nadia, por ejemplo, tiene afectaciones de sedimentación por el tema de corrientes, por el río Chamelecón en Honduras, que es un afluente importante de sedimento para el arrecife mesoamericano. Siguiente, por favor. Estos son los datos para Honduras, y nuevamente vemos que Cayos Cochinos genera o mantiene una mayor biomasa de peces. Si vemos también y tratan de recordar los números de Belice, pues obviamente Belice tiene una mayor productividad en comparación con Honduras, y dentro de las áreas protegidas hondureñas, pues Cayos Cochinos es el que genera una mayor producción de biomasa. Lastimosamente no pudimos hacer a tiempo el análisis del Parque Nacional Marino Islas de la Bahía, pero si ustedes observan a la izquierda la pequeña leyenda que habla de biomasa de peces comerciales, notarán que es el área protegida que presenta sitios más oscuros, es decir, mayor cantidad de biomasa, y muy probablemente si estuviera en este análisis superaría incluso la biomasa que genera Cayos Cochinos. Nuevamente esto tiene que ver con la distancia de los arrecifes en las islas de la bahía con respecto a la costa y la menor afectación en cuanto a sedimentos. Esto sería todo de mi parte y pues continuará Alejandra, pero si tienen alguna pregunta, con mucho gusto.
Thank you so much, Luis, for your presentation, for that overview. At this time, we're going to pass on to Alejandra Calzada for our last presentation. We're going to ask you if you have any questions or comments to save them directly after the last presentation. We're going to move into our discussion session where you will have the opportunity to ask and add to this very rich discussion today. Alejandra Calzada works with stakeholders across sectors to integrate adaptation into ongoing conservation and development processes. She has experience working in the government, civil society, and private sectors. Alejandra holds a master's degree in conservation leadership from Colorado State University and El Colegio de la Frontera Sur. She is a Mesoamerican Reef Senior Officer, WWF Mexico. Alejandra, the time is yours.
Muchísimas gracias. Y gracias a todos porque se quedaron hasta ahorita, estamos un poquito atrasados. Voy a tratar de apurarme para poder dejar la mayor cantidad de tiempo posible para sus preguntas, y para los que se tengan que ir, pues lo sentimos, pero esta presentación está quedando grabada. Siguiente, por favor. Bueno, yo les voy a platicar sobre una serie de estudios que estamos llevando a cabo para entender cuáles son las percepciones sociales o de las comunidades que hay al respecto de los arrecifes y de las áreas naturales protegidas del Sistema Arrecifal Mesoamericano. Y esto para nosotros es muy importante porque sabemos que los arrecifes, por supuesto que no son sistemas aislados, que forman parte del sistema socioecológico que es el arrecife mesoamericano, y creemos que las comunidades que viven en estos sitios y que dependen de estos recursos juegan un papel fundamental, tanto porque dependen del bienestar de estos sitios, porque además sus acciones los afectan. Entonces queríamos tratar de entender un poco cómo estaba el conocimiento y las percepciones que estas personas tienen al respecto de los arrecifes. Aquí les voy a presentar apenas una partecita chiquita de lo que hemos estado haciendo y solamente de algunos sitios. El resto de las áreas protegidas en las que hemos desarrollado no nos da tiempo de presentarlo, pero me voy a enfocar en 3 áreas naturales protegidas, empezando por la de México. Siguiente, por favor. Este es el mapa en donde se están aplicando los sitios, las encuestas. Siguiente, por favor. Lo que queríamos entender al respecto de estos grupos de los que viven cerca de estos sitios son cuál es el estado de los ecosistemas en su opinión y qué tendencias hay, qué tanto conocen las reglas, la normatividad que hay en estos sitios, qué tanto ellos creen que su bienestar depende del bienestar y la salud de los arrecifes, y finalmente algunos aspectos de gobernanza. Siguiente, por favor. Entonces, para la primera área natural protegida que les voy a contar es el Parque Nacional Costa Occidental de Isla Mujeres, Punta Cancún y Punta Nizuc, del cual ya Arturo en la primera presentación nos platicó un poco cuál era el contexto y la gobernanza. Bueno, quería nada más contarles que aplicamos esta encuesta a más de 60 personas, de las cuales incluían a 6 grupos pesqueros y 27 grupos turísticos. Algo interesante que refleja un poco las brechas sociales que existen en este sitio es que más del 90% de las personas entrevistadas eran hombres, y esto es un indicativo pues también de la brecha que existe entre hombres y mujeres, y que además refleja cuál es la población económicamente activa de este sitio. Y por otro lado también hay una brecha en el nivel educativo de las personas, en el sentido de que el sector pesquero tiende a tener un nivel de educación formal mucho menos elevado que el nivel de educación del turismo, y esto tiene diferentes tipos de implicaciones, aunque como vamos a ver después, en muchas ocasiones el sector pesquero interesantemente tiende a tener un mejor entendimiento del bienestar del arrecife y cómo esto se relaciona con ellos mismos. Siguiente, por favor. Lo que ellos perciben, como pueden ver aquí, es que en general el estado del arrecife es bueno. Algunos de ellos, o sea, las respuestas se distribuyen desde muy mal hasta excelente, pero la mayor cantidad de respuestas están en bien y muy bien. Y lo mismo cuando les preguntamos qué es lo que ellos han observado en los últimos 5 años, si observan que hay una tendencia hacia lo positivo y hacia lo negativo. En general, todos creen que está desde bien hacia muy bien, aunque hay distribuido sobre todas las respuestas. De las amenazas que ellos perciben como más importantes son el blanqueamiento de coral, definitivamente fue de las respuestas más comunes, así como los huracanes, el desarrollo urbano y también la contaminación que viene de tierra adentro, como lo hemos ya visto a lo largo de este webinar. Pero también prácticas directas que se hacen directo en el arrecife, como pesca ilegal, como temas de turismo y de embarcaciones, que hay demasiadas embarcaciones en el sitio. Y finalmente se menciona también un poco el tema del sargazo, que también ya se ha mencionado en este webinar. Siguiente, por favor. Con respecto, esta para mí es de los resultados más interesantes que hay en todo este estudio, y es que la mayor cantidad de las respuestas, yo diría que casi todas, cuando se les pregunta qué tanto consideran que su bienestar personal depende de la existencia y de la salud del arrecife de coral, la gran mayoría de los actores perciben que su bienestar depende o totalmente o mucho de la existencia o de la salud de estos arrecifes, y creemos que este es un aspecto fundamental que nos ayudará a aplicar este tipo de estrategias de manejo, pues de manejo coordinado con las comunidades que ven en este sitio. Si ellos perciben que su bienestar depende mucho de esto, pues creemos que hay una actitud positiva que podemos aprovechar. Y algo también que percibimos es que ellos saben cuáles son los beneficios que cuáles son estos servicios que las áreas naturales protegidas ofrecen en términos de protección contra huracanes, protección contra la erosión, incluso también términos de aspectos de salud, de seguridad alimentaria. Siguiente, por favor. Y finalmente, algo interesante fue que la mayoría de ellos perciben que tienen una buena relación con la institución encargada, que es la CONAMP, y algo rápidamente un mapa de palabras que nos dice cuáles son los tipos de actividades que ellos creen que es necesario implementar a partir de ahora, que tienen que ver mucho con educación y con vinculación con las comunidades, pero también, por ejemplo, temas como de vigilancia y aplicación de sanciones, aplicación de la ley. Siguiente. Con esto cierro la parte del análisis de México. Y voy a platicarles muy rápidamente sobre lo que encontramos hasta ahorita, que esto todavía lo estamos terminando, pero para la parte de Belice trabajamos en 2 áreas naturales protegidas. La primera, que se llama Port Honduras. En esta área entrevistamos a personas de un sector un poco más amplio, incluye el sector pesquero, turismo, a 2 capitanes, a un miembro de la comunidad y a un actor encargado, un profesional de la conservación. De ellos, el 100% dicen comprender cuál es el objetivo de establecer un área marina protegida. Siguiente, por favor. Cuando les preguntamos por qué ellos creen que las áreas marinas protegidas y los arrecifes de corales son importantes, el tipo de respuestas que nos dicen es que es importante para proteger, las áreas marinas son importantes para proteger las pesquerías o los stocks pesqueros, temas, por ejemplo, de vida silvestre, biodiversidad, naturaleza, y ya hacia la segunda parte de las respuestas, temas, por ejemplo, de turismo, de empleo, conservación en general. Y finalmente, con respecto a los arrecifes de coral, ¿por qué creen que ellos son importantes? Hablan también de porque son hábitat para especies para la vida marina, porque protegen contra la erosión, protegen contra tormentas, porque pueden ser hábitat para juveniles, pesquerías, incluyen también algunas pocas respuestas sobre la importancia del turismo. Siguiente, por favor. Cuando les preguntamos qué opinan sobre las condiciones en las que se encuentran actualmente las áreas marinas protegidas, ellos, la gran mayoría de ellas nos dicen que está en más o menos estado de conservación, y algunas de las amenazas que identifican, la primera tiene que ver con, hay un tema recurrente de contaminación, de basura, de descargas de aguas que vienen de tierra adentro. También un tema pesquero importante en un segundo nivel de sobrepesca, de pesca ilegal. Y finalmente algunas menciones a temas indirectos como es el cambio climático o incluso falta de financiamiento, por ejemplo, para el manejo de esta área natural protegida. Siguiente. Cuando preguntamos si ellos creen que el manejo es suficiente, que se está haciendo suficientemente efectivo, la mayoría de ellos nos dicen o que no lo es o que es más o menos. Y el tipo de acciones y de actividades que ellos piden son mayor vigilancia, mayores recursos para guardaparques. Hay mucha carga sobre este tipo de medidas. También nos hablan, por ejemplo, de que se buscan soluciones innovadoras, soluciones de tecnología y soluciones modernas, pero por supuesto reconocen que hay una necesidad de más guardaparques y que ellos tengan mejores capacitaciones y mejores salarios para poder hacer su trabajo. Siguiente. Finalmente, en Holchan, la Reserva Marina Holchan, desafortunadamente solamente hasta este punto tenemos respuestas de 3 personas. El levantamiento de encuestas sigue en curso, pero no quisimos dejar fuera esta NP. Cuando les preguntamos ellos por qué creían que las áreas marinas protegidas eran importantes, nos hablan de temas de conservación de vida marina y con temas de medios de vida como son el turismo, pero también hablan incluso de cómo es que el impacto indirecto de las áreas naturales puede tener fuera de estos sitios. Habla como del replenishment de las especies fuera de las áreas naturales protegidas. Ellos creen que los arrecifes coralinos son importantes para la protección de las costas y también contra eventos meteorológicos y contra la erosión. Pero también hablan sobre biodiversidad y medios de vida. Y finalmente, siguiente, por favor. En cuanto a las amenazas que ellos identifican en estos sitios, son la destrucción del coral, la pesca ilegal, malas prácticas de turismo. Y en cuanto a necesidades de manejo que ellos identifican, sobre todo tenemos temas de vigilancia y de guardaparques y que ellos tengan acceso a mejor tecnología. Siguiente. Es todo por mi parte, muchas gracias, y aquí pues tenemos un poquito de espacio para hacer algunas preguntas, no solo esto, sino en general para toda la sesión. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Alejandra, for that wonderful presentation. At this time, we're going to move into the discussion section of our program. At this time, we're going to also be able to have our participants open their microphones and participate verbally, audibly with the with your interventions. We are going to ask that each participant use the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will be bringing you on to speak in the order in which you raise your hands. So the questions, the discussion in this session can be in relation to all the presentations that you have seen this morning. A lot of information has been presented. It's really laid kind of a foundation for where we are, where we want to go, and what is being done. So at this time, I'm going to also ask Nadia to unmute herself, just in case there are any introductions that she would like us to do before we move into the raise hand section. I'll also ask that when you take the microphone to speak, you identify yourself by your name and the organization or the sector you are representing.
Thanks, Michelle. So we see there's a question from Maria Jose Gonzalez. That's the first raised hand I'm seeing.
Yes, it is. Maria, you can go ahead.
You're on mute, Maria Jose. I'm not too sure if she can hear us or not. But Maria Jose, we see that your hand is raised, so I don't know if you want to pose a question.
One of the participants is saying that the option for them to speak still hasn't been given as yet, so they're not able to unmute themselves.
Okay.
Right. We need to raise your hands, and then once your hand is raised, so I'm going to ask our technicians to just unmute Maria Jose. Perhaps she cannot unmute herself on her end. Once you raise your hand, then you will get the mic option available to you. So only those participants that have indicated that they want to speak by raising of their hands will get the mic option available to them. Yanira Pop, I see your hand up. Can you try and unmute yourself? There we go, Yanira. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. It's not Yanira. I'm just using her. My name is, I'm the husband of Yanira Pop. First of all, I would like to thank you for this presentation, all of you. You guys did a wonderful job. And my question is, I work with I'm a tour guide, and I work with the company of H2O Tierra, representing them. And my job is a guide, and I'm a lead guide for snorkeling. Now, my question is how we are controlling the stony coral disease in Belize, and what prevention is we are trying to do with it. You know?
I could answer. Yes, I could answer that. I missed your name, but
my name is Virginia Pop.
Okay, great. So in Belize, there is a National Coral Reef Monitoring Working Group. That is a body that coordinates reef monitoring within the country. It consists of members from the government and from the marine protected areas managers and researchers. So as part of this process, through support from our fund and also being spearheaded by the Healthy Reef Initiative, there are other MPAs, MPA managing organization. There are current efforts right now to assess the disease spread and to undertake some treatment actions to try and stem the further spread of the disease. So over the summer, a lot of this work will be ramping up. And I think there will also be some efforts to make sure that the results are effectively communicated with the dive and snorkel tourism industry for that to be that two-way exchange of information.
Okay, excellent answer. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well, Mr. Pop. Maria Jose, can you try again?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You can go ahead.
I am sorry. I had a problem here. And sort of like I dropped on my side. Can you please repeat?
You have audio. You can go ahead with your question.
Oh, I am sorry. No, this was a mistake. I do not have a question. I am sorry about that. And then I lost sound. I am sorry.
Oh, sure. No problem.
So Maria Jose, the full webinar has been recorded, and this will be circulated to participants as well. And we are also asking presenters, their permission to share the actual presentations too. So all of these will be uploaded to the website where that we share that where people were able to register. So for those section of the webinar that you weren't able to benefit from, there will be the full recording for you.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Thank you.
I can see that Melanie has her hand up as well. I would like to ask Mr. Pop to lower his hand unless he has another question. We have two questions in the question and answer box. One question, but Carol Ishtabalan, if you would like to voice your questions, you can raise your hand. If not, we will read them off the screen. But Melanie, you can take the microphone at this time.
Okay, hey everyone. Really good presentations. I was curious about like that social science study with the sample of 3 in Ho Chan. Now, how are you going to get more samples? Because we really need to be able to compare this. So that's great. But is this kind of ongoing? Are you still working on it? Or are there things that others can do to help get more surveys answered so they'll be comparable?
Yes, sir. Yes,
hello, Melanie. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Nadia. You can take that one.
Okay. Yes, Melanie. The survey for the social surveys for the MPAs are ongoing. For Ho Chan, we started this the survey late, this last week. So those are just some initial results, So we'll be updating that. We are continuing to get results, through collaboration with Ho Chan Marine Reserve, So,
okay, good. So yeah, so this is kind of ongoing, and you'll be able to get another update. And yeah, and regarding the ecological ones, I just think it would be interesting to compare, look at the data of comparing all the sites with just that minimum number of indicators that you have, like how would it compare, or even like I think Half Moon Cay is kind of the extreme, right? Because it only has 2 indicators. If you just compare all of the sites by those 2 indicators, what kind of result do you get? Or you put in average values for these indicators into the Half Moon Cay, how does it vary? Because if the missing indicators are some of the higher ranking or lower ranking indicators, that's really going to change the result. And you want this to be kind of comparative, right? That's part of the purpose, so you can compare between these MPAs.
Yeah, indeed. The missing overall across the system, the common missing indicator is the sedimentation. But for a few of the MPAs, there is missing information for coral disease. And then there is one MPA, I believe, that had missing information for sea urchins. And as you know, the herbivores, are a very important indicator to assess. So While for that in the MPA that had missing information for urchins, we were only able to look at the fish, the herbivorous fish biomass. You're right, in the case of half moon key, the significant information is missing for sure, and the aim would be to encourage the manager to see that they can target those indicators so that it could be, compared across, along with the other MPs, pretty much. No? But we want
but I think there is some data somewhere. So there is diadema data for Half Moon, for that atoll, for Half Moon Key. Well, okay, so you're only looking inside the park.
Yeah. And the aim too is for, that the MPA managers, will be able to replicate the study in the future, looking at their site, their MPA, but for our work, we wanted to get a broader, regional understanding of what it looks like across MPAs, no? But we, I don't think, for us that work regionally, we can replicate the study more broadly, but for the individual MPA, if they're interested in replicating the study immediately or just based on their site, then they can do so, no? And try to work at filling in those additional or those missing indicators.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for your contribution. Nadia, for your answers. We have 2 questions in the chat box. I'd like to remind our panelists that when we are interacting with our participants, that we turn on their cameras. It helps a lot in the way of communication. The first question that we have in the chat box is from Carol Ishtawalan. I barely heard the name of Guatemala as one of the countries working for coral reef conservation. Of course, it has no big marine areas of its own, but I want to make clear it has cooperated significantly for the purpose of marine But I want to make clear, has it cooperated significantly for the purpose of marine coastal conservation?
For this study, unfortunately, there were a number of, we were targeting protected areas in Honduras, Mexico, and Belize, because that's where we had built into the project. So we don't have any information, for this study for Guatemala, but it's a gap that we can look at in filling going forward too, no? But I know other entities such as HRI has been working on reef studies for Guatemala and have wealth of information that they have shared through their report card and their eco audit as well. So I don't know if Melanie might want to chime in and just, say a few words as it relates to that.
Okay, so yes, we could, I'm on my phone, so I don't know how to do the video. There we go. I don't know if that worked. Anyway, you could rank these things for the sites in Guatemala, since we have complete data for Guatemala. So yeah, and now it's a protected area inside the Cayman Crown. So that could be something you could look at, like now that protection has just been implemented in 2020, maybe the resiliency will change over time. I don't know, that would be good to be able to show that, but we could, look at those indicators. We just need you to rank the ones that you did in that kind of modeling approach. But for the ecological ones, we have all of those for those sites.
Great.
Yeah. And the other question that we have also from Carol, I want to know what can be done to cooperate with the conservation of coral reef and marine life if we live away from coastal areas.
Well, we are always willing, to look at cooperation. Our approach in conservation management generally has been a ridge to reef, perspective, because we know that what happens on land can make its way into the marine environment. So any pollutant runoffs, from the rivers, the watersheds, make them way into the marine environment, impacting these coastal ecosystems, including reefs. So we are always looking for options, to do so. They are varied approach. There is the Mar2R project that is currently looking at a ridge to reef perspective, and I believe there are entities within the 4 countries that have aspects being supported through that project as well. No.
Perfect. We still have a few more minutes. If anybody else has any other interventions or contributions they'd like to make to the conversation, the raise hand feature, we just go ahead and use that and we can address your questions or hear whatever concerns that you might be having after being with us this morning and going through the presentations. Gustavo, you can go ahead.
Sí, buenas tardes, buenos días o buenas tardes a todos y todas. Realmente fue muy interesante todas las presentaciones del día de hoy, todas bien, excelente. Yo tengo una duda con la persona que presentó de México al inicio. Era sobre que si se lanzaban pecios o otro tipo de estructura para los corales artificiales, que eso podría, una vez que se poblaba de corales, podía competir con el coral original. No me quedó bien claro esa situación. Entonces tal vez me podría dar un poquito más de explicación de eso.
Rosario, Arturo salió, pero creo que volvió a entrar. No sé si esté por ahí como participante para que puedan abrir su micrófono. Ya.
I guess he may have
he's there listed as a participant, or he was there listed as a participant.
Okay.
I'm not seeing him.
I think he's gone again.
Yeah, he might have been disconnected.
So this may be a question that we can try to get the answer to and provide after the workshop.
And definitely that is something we can move towards. Yani, Mr. Pop, your hand is raised again. If you have another question, you can go ahead. And then I also acknowledge Maria Vega has her hand up and needs to be given the opportunity to speak. Mr. Pop?
Yes, okay, once again. This was a concern about, as we know, Belize, a small country. And we know as a nation that we have several ports that are not quite opening to the tourism industry. And do we all prepare for this impact in tourism about these ships coming to Belize?
Very good question. Yeah, this is something that we definitely need to start touching base with the government on and the Ministry of Tourism as well. Certainly, the increase in the port will have impact, could potentially have significant impact on the coastal ecosystems. The loss of mangroves, for example, the environmental footprint could be very large. And then there's also the overload of tourists coming to the country too, which could affect, have some degree of pressures on the sites that they visit. So we have to worry about carrying capacity for those locations as well. So these are definitely things that we need to pay some closer attention to as we move forward and with these, development activities for the country.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We have Maria Vega next, and then we have 2 questions in the chat box.
Hi, greetings, everybody. Michelle, good to see you. Nadia, everybody. I have a question about all this valuable information that we all work so hard for. Do you have any kind of study or anything that can show whether it's reaching enough of the young people around the region? Like all the scientific information and the right way of doing things. Have you engaged in anything that would measure if it's being mainstreamed, like especially for young people? Thank you.
Yeah, very good question, Maria Vega. Certainly, that's something knowledge brokering is, we could improve on that certainly, to make sure that the information is shared in a manner that would be digestible for, for youths and for grassroots communities as well, in addition to, policy and technical people. And so that's where we certainly need to, through our communication channels, and the partnership we have across the board with the research scientists, with the NGOs, the co-managers, and to see how best we can help to, better disseminate this information further. I know the results of this study, we are going to be creating some products, that will be disseminated. So finding the right channels to do so would be good too, because we can use people like you to help disseminate this information too. Your organization would be, that would be beneficial to the process too.
Thank you so much, Nidia. The next question, I believe, is directed at Alejandra Reyes. And the question is, good morning, my name is Joana Valle. I am from Honduras. Where can I go to volunteer my service in Honduras?
Creo que puedo tomar esa. Bueno, muchas de las áreas protegidas en Honduras pues cuentan incluso por ley con un programa de voluntariado. Yo creo que los lugares más significativos a nivel del Caribe son Cayos Cochinos, las islas de Utila y Roatán. Ambos cuentan con programas de voluntariados. Puedes revisar los sitios web de la Fundación Cayos Cochinos, por ejemplo. En el caso de Utila, la Fundación Islas de la Bahía. Y en el caso de Roatán, puedes visitar Roatán Marine Park o VICA, que son algunas de las organizaciones que reciben voluntarios. Muy seguramente también hay colegas en Tela, como Tela Marín, que están trabajando en el refugio de vida silvestre, Bahía de Tela, que estarían encantados de tener voluntarios también, al igual que Prolánzate.
Thank you very much, Luis. The next question we have in our chat box is actually in Spanish. So I don't know if one of our translators can help me with that on the English side. No, the one by Roger Flores in the Q&A, not in the chat box, I'm sorry, in the Q&A.
Let me translate that question then.
Oh,
So
Luis says he can take the lead.
yeah, sure. So we got two questions from Roger Flores. He's wondering what strategies are we proposing to improve the situation on the watersheds in Honduras and Guatemala, which are the ones that are bringing a lot of sediments to the reef systems. And he says that actually this sediment is very worrying. I'm going to continue in Spanish. Bueno, realmente parte de ese análisis es precisamente identificar las cuencas que están generando este impacto en el arrecife y en qué partes del arrecife lo están generando. Yo creo que ese es un gran punto de partida. Adicional, WWF a través del proyecto Costas Listas está generando mapas de información geográfica que indican qué áreas están produciendo mayor sedimento y qué estrategias podemos implementar, como por ejemplo la restauración de zonas de bosque o la implementación de buenas prácticas para agricultura sostenible e incluso producción específica como la palma aceitera sostenible que puede ayudar a mejorar los procesos de retención de suelo. En este momento no tenemos la información en la presentación, pero sí WWF estará compartiendo este tipo de datos con los actores clave, tanto a nivel de autoridades como con comanejadores de las áreas protegidas y la ciudadanía en general a través de programas de comunicación.
Thank you so much, Luis. We have Angel, and I can't say that last name, with his hand up. If he can get the microphone passed to him. Mr. Pop, if you don't have any additional questions, we'll ask you to lower your hand. Angel, you can go ahead, and that will be our last comment for this section as we wrap up today's workshop.
Hola, buenos días. Pues solamente agradecer el conocimiento impartido por cada uno de ustedes. La verdad que es de mucho honor escucharles, ya que son temas súper importantes, las áreas protegidas, los arrecifes de corales, que se deben manejar. Este es un tema que nos debe interesar a todos. Presentar un interés muy importante, ya que sirve como turismo, sirve como para recaudar fondos en ciertas áreas. Yo soy del área de recursos naturales y sí, la verdad que estoy muy agradecido por haber aceptado mi invitación para participar aquí en esta capacitación, y gracias, muy contento con el conocimiento que nos transmitieron a todos. Gracias, buen día.
Gracias. Precisamente este es el objetivo de este tipo de webinarios, es poder compartir la información que tradicionalmente se quedaba muchas veces en nuestros escritorios, y justamente esta es la intención, poder hacer llegar la información a la mayor cantidad de personas posibles y que nos acompañen a resolver los distintos retos que tiene el arrecife mesoamericano para su conservación.
Muchas gracias.
This morning, we'd like to thank all our panelists for taking the time to be here with us this morning, for their presentations that have definitely contributed to the body of work that is ongoing across this region. We'd like to especially thank our participants, those of you who have been with us all morning and have participated, has listened, been a part of our discussion, and really enriched this entire process. We'd like to also take the time to acknowledge the organizations that have made this initiative possible: WWF, the National Capital Project, Mesoamerican Reef Fund, NOAA, International Climate Initiative, Healthy Reefs for Healthy People, Medio Ambiente, CONAMP, Belize Fisheries Department, the Government of Honduras, and the Instituto de Conservación Forestal. I'd like to thank you all for making this possible, the ongoing work that we're doing. And at this time, Nadia, we're getting ready to close. I don't know if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our participants with. We know that you will be following up with additional correspondence and presentations that were shared today.
Yes, I would like to echo a major thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your morning, I know we're in the afternoon, to participate in this workshop. We hope that the information shared has been, has and will be beneficial for you and for your organization. World Wildlife Fund remains very open and ready to collaborate with anyone that wants to replicate this kind of work going forward beyond, the partnership we currently have right now. We will continue to share the information that we generate through the studies. We also have an additional project that is ongoing that Luis made reference to, the Smart Coast project, or in Spanish. Costa Inteligente. Listas Inteligente, where we would have some, a lot of findings and to share from that as well, including adaptation strategies for coastal, for the coastal zone, for mangroves, for seagrass, coral reefs, and also looking at the watershed and see what can be done there. So it doesn't stop here. So you'll be hearing from us again in the very near future. So for the time being, we intend to, the full webinar has been recorded, as I mentioned before, and we will be uploading the recording of the webinar to the same website from which you did your registration. There will also be copies of the presentation in there as well. So if you need to reach us, I believe you can reach us through that channel, and as well as the email address that we had shared in our presentation as well too. So thanks once again for participating in today's workshop.
Gracias.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Guys, thank you very much.